at this meeting, if I remember. Let me just get on the
Hey
Zoom.
Jackie, is anyone from FinCom on Zoom?
Or from ARPA?
No, not FinCom. And from what? I'm sorry?
Is anyone from the ARPA on Zoom? I didn't know if Joe was gonna be on Zoom. I'm trying to launch.
Oh, no Joe and no Andrew. Looks like everybody else is in the room though,
Yeah, I
right?
know, I think Andrew told me at the end of the last meeting he wasn't gonna be able to make this one. So I'm just
Okay.
getting on the Zoom just to monitor.
But I don't see any other FinCom, school committee, or select board members on the Zoom right now.
Good select board does quorum.
One in the room. So you got quorum for select board.
Okay, and I have the Zoom up, so if anyone has to be called to order, I will monitor that. Okay, well, I will call the ARPA Advisory Committee meeting to order. And just to go over the agenda briefly this evening, we will start with public comment, then move on to a presentation and discussion from Reading Recreation to address some possible ARPA funding needs that are applicable to recreation. We had on the agenda a presentation and discussion by Reading Elder Services. They will be coming to the next meeting, not this one. I don't know if we have to take a vote to not do that agenda item. It's not a hearing and we're not moving it. So that will give us more time for questions and answers on recreation, and maybe Mr. Doxer knows what Reading Elder Services is gonna be bringing up. You can just give us like a 2 or 3 minute preview of what we should be looking for, or?
Sure, and actually, we've got the Elder
Okay.
Services group
Okay,
is in fact
so
on
we,
the
it's
call.
not a full presentation, but there's a little time on the agenda just to get us thinking. Because you'll see when we get to the working list discussion that I tried to go over every item that anyone has given us from any source and put it into a spreadsheet and then categorize it, so it's got gaps. It's just a starting point, and any information we get tonight can help fill that out. So that would be a working list discussion. The packet has, kind of just I took Joe, who just walked in, sent me a very detailed spreadsheet with some ranking guidelines that we'll probably move on to the end. I stole the best of his ideas and a few that we discussed and kind of created something smaller. And hopefully, I'm concerned with having to hear from more groups. We may or may not have enough for survey, but I'd like to continue what we discussed before and see if we think we would be ready after town meeting. And then it would just be discuss future agenda items and review the minutes, our usual ending. So maybe instead of the 9:25 end time, we'll get out a little closer to 9 without the full Elder Services discussion. So before we move on to the presentation, is there any public comment?
Karen, call select board order.
Good point. Thank you
Yep,
very
sure.
much. I'd like to call the Reading Select Board to order. Make a motion to call the Reading Select Board to order.
Yep.
Second.
Thank you.
I don't think you have to second that one, do you?
All select board members are in the room, Karen Herrick, Chris Haley, and Mark Doxer. Thank you.
Jackie, I don't think there's anyone, FinCom can be called to order, right?
No.
No, just only 3 of us. Okay, so sorry, Karen, about not having you call to order. Any public comment before we, yes? Sir, can you just identify it?
Tim Kelly, I'm here with John Douglas from the Reading Rotary Club.
Oh, okay, yes, I heard.
Sorry, Tim. Can he be heard on Zoom, Jackie, or?
So you get a little closer
You
to the
gotta be closer.
microphone.
Closer to this?
That would be great if we could get closer to the microphone, that'll make
Okay,
it easier.
where's the microphone? Okay.
Yeah.
Tim Kelly from the Reading Rotary Club. With me here is John Douglas, who's our president this year. And I just wanted to very briefly make a request that you consider the Reading Fall Street Fair as a recipient of the funds. We are a tax exempt nonprofit, and we run the street fair. It's the biggest one-day event in the town. It's very important, I think, for building positive community spirit in the town, but also for the businesses. It was created by the Economic Development Committee. How many years we're into it, but it was run by the town for a dozen years or so, and we run it the last 5 or so years. We've taken a hit on it. We couldn't run it in 2020. We had a smaller, tighter one last year, but we did have it, and we would like you to consider, put us on the list and let us, we can certainly provide more information, but I just wanted to, make a request that we be considered for some funds in this for the Fall Street Fair.
So I just want to respond that I had heard through the grapevine about this, and if you look at page 8 of, I guess it's page 14 of the packet, 16 of the packet, I tentatively put you down for an amount. I don't know if it's the right amount, but you're on our list
Okay.
as a community priority. I spoke with a member of the Rotary, Jeannie Borowski.
Yeah, so
Offline.
I'm very down on the list of people who couldn't. Jean couldn't be here, and then John Feudo and Sheila Clark, and then I said, John, you're going to do the presentation. He said, no, you go ahead and do it. So he sent me the packet. I have to say I didn't read it. I got to page 1 and I just saw the time and date. So anyway, I haven't, but I appreciate that. And I just wanted to, I really wasn't prepared to give any,
Well, I think
anything detailed on that, but we certainly would appreciate that.
one thing, I put down 30,000 because that was just something that I was informally hearing, but as is in the packet, we had gotten a more formalized memo from the Chamber of Commerce with the request. And so maybe if your organization could give us a memo with just what you want the money for, is it time sensitive, and how much?
Sure.
Because then we'll be able to fit that in. Or certainly, as you've heard our discussions, we've been talking about community priorities.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that'd be great. We will definitely do that.
does everyone think that's a good idea?
Yeah, maybe in the next couple of weeks if that's doable.
Yeah, our next meeting, I think, is like May 12th or around about that time. And we want to get a survey out to the community after that. So it would be good to get,
So
different kinds of
before that,
community requests. So some, still you can get through town meeting and then after town meeting if something comes into us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Could I just ask you, so you're saying that last year you operated the street fair at a loss?
No. I said it was smaller than
Oh,
it had been. We had probably in the low hundreds of 100 booths. I'm not sure. I don't know the number offhand.
We had 110 booths and we normally have about 200.
So, yeah, I was just asking because, yeah, if you ran this thing and took a loss on it, and obviously it's pretty incredible for the community, you shouldn't be.
We did not run it at a loss. We were able to cover our costs and raise some fund. All the funds we raise, we donate back into the community. So, we donate. So we're all volunteers, and this isn't going anywhere other than for the costs. And then any fundraising we do above and beyond that goes towards our donations.
So just actually that leads me to a question. Is it correct that some of the costs you incur are paying for the town to do cleanup and police detail? Are those the kinds of things
Yeah,
that
the
you
largest
incur?
amount of our costs are towards the town expenses, yeah. They have been over, last several years. Last year was a little different, and then we didn't do it the year before, but, we've had upwards of like $20,000 in expenses.
Proportional to the size of the number of booths, right? Probably.
Some of it is,
How many
yeah. So
streets
last
you
year was a
took out?
little less. It was probably had largely to do because we didn't need as much, DPW and police presence for it because it was smaller footprint and less trash, But when we've had it bigger, it's been, the expenses are a lot higher.
Okay, any other questions from? Thank you. Okay, yes, you, sir? If you could just.
Hi,
identify.
Richard Abadi from the Reading Superior Officer Association, the Reading Police Department. And I'm here with members of all the first responder organizations, fire, dispatch, patrol, and supervisors. This group back in, I think it might have been September, the original financial forum, when
I
you were
remember that.
discussing spending the money, read a joint statement requesting to be considered for allocating some of the money, which was the original intent, one of the original intents, and when the grant was issued. We recently made another request again in front of the select board, and we just wanted to take the opportunity to make this request in front of the official recommendation committee. We haven't had an opportunity to come up here and address it yet. We have noticed that there is a line item on there in the matrix somewhere for.
Yeah, and I
essential
put it under
employee.
kind of human services, social selections, which could also be lumped into community priorities, but we don't have an amount.
Yeah, so
yet.
that, I think one of the things we want to come up here today was to offer any assistance you might need in gathering information on what other communities may have done or how they approach it, something along those lines to fill in that blank, because it did seem like one of the only ones that didn't really have a
Yeah,
number in there.
it kind of almost, we're gonna see where everything else comes and then, or it's a defined percentage, I think is something we were gonna ask the community. So just so we understand, if you can refresh us, that the groups that are, it's the police, the fire, the
And
dispatch.
Yeah, I
um,
mean, I wouldn't, I'm not sure that I could speak to going much further out of that group. Those are just the groups that I know that did continue to come to work uninterrupted from day one. You know, and that's how I would define an essential employee, someone who continued to come to your place of business uninterrupted, I would think, you know. I don't know how far you expand that scope, but.
Yeah, no, you had mentioned Arlington in the select board meeting.
I only mentioned Arlington because I was actually mentioned in one of your meetings. I think that one of the examples that the town
Yeah.
manager presented mentioned Arlington, and it said something around like 9 or 11% of their funds were
Right, and
earmarked towards
Arlington
that.
was a little different than some communities, cause they expanded it to teachers
Yeah,
and private frontline workers, which
Yeah.
was, it's a a little bit,
yeah, it was a big,
different.
I mean, 11% was like $4 million, I think we said in that
I mean, they
meeting.
got
It
like
came out
40
to-
million or so, they got a
Yeah,
huge,
they got
35
40
million.
It was, I know the police got 6,000. I'm not sure if they broke that percentage down like lower for other people or private people, but we do have a lot of studies that have started to come out from chiefs of police and like the bigger unions that have asked their smaller units like what has broken down. So we do have some numbers.
I mean, if you have other communities, and especially if they've extended it to the schools or not, might be a good comparison, because this, the schools were remote, but there were some workers definitely, as Ms. Chair Wise would attest, right? Special ed, there were frontline workers there that were working through, so
Yeah,
we probably wanna understand how many people total.
yeah, I can find that out. Well,
Yeah, I mean,
try
you
to
could
that
find out how many communities it were just maybe for, like, how many communities did it,
Yeah,
if you know.
how they broke down.
And like I said to Mr. Kelly, I suppose a memo was useful, or even just something in writing, an email is fine too.
Okay,
But you're definitely in our view, cause I tried to list everything,
yeah, we appreciate that. I mean, we
Yeah.
saw that in the packet. We just didn't know if we needed to assist you in trying
Yeah,
to
I think
figure
it would be helpful,
how-
because it's
how to
hard
get
to,
home.
it may be a percent or it may be an amount. And,
Okay.
I don't think we're gonna just leave it like up to community discretion. We haven't figured that out, but we have to keep it in our view.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is there any other community comment or public comment? Okay, seeing none, I think the next,
Check online.
Jackie, any? Because we didn't have that many on this.
No hands raised.
No hands raised, good. I gotta get my Zoom up. Okay, so I guess Reading Rec, then you are on, and we were all sent your presentation as well.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.
Thanks folks for coming in.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And we need you to come up.
That's good?
Sure. As long as they can hear you through that, but you got that one close to you, so you're.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having us. I was really excited to hear that recreation was gonna be considered for some ARPA funding, and I'm beyond appreciative that you're taking the opportunity to hear this presentation. I'm Jenna Fiorenti, for anybody who doesn't know me. I'm the recreation administrator here in town. I do see some familiar faces from the select board and school committee, and I know Tom, you're very involved in youth sports as well. So this project, we've been working on it since 2007, before I was even here. But I've been involved in the project since 2012 when I came on board as the program coordinator. And since then, we've done numerous community surveys and have used Activitas, our design consultant, to help us with the conceptual design for the master plan, and really thought that this is just a great end product. And we also saw the impact that our community had during COVID, and the need for people to get outside and have passive spaces that they can just gather safely and be together. So we just think that this first phase that we came up with collectively will really be a tremendous asset to the Birch Meadow complex and service so many parts of the community, not just the youth, but the seniors who can go and walk on the walking path in the morning. So really multi-generational space, and just an opportunity for our communities to safely gather and really amp up that space. So without further ado, we have our awesome design consultant here who, again, will lead you through some of the historic details and go over more of the financials of the first phase of the project. Steve, you can take it away.
Thank you, Jenna. I'm Steve Christopherly with Activitas, the project manager and landscape architect. I've been working on the Birch Meadow complex along with a couple of the fields with the high school and the town. Can I control changing this page or? Yeah, okay, thank you. So like Jenna said, this master plan has been going on for quite some time, going back to 2007, and looking over all of the documents, surveys, all the information that was provided to us over the last few years, and then conducting new user group and stakeholder interviews with various community groups, sport groups. The end result was ultimately the same as the surveys that were previously done, which kind of put priority on passive recreation, restrooms, concessions, and lighting, which is a huge safety factor. And we also looked at the parking lot, the Imagination Station parking lot, to increase some parking, get some parking off the street, and that would be a kind of a restoration project with conservation and but I'm going ahead of myself, sorry. Can you go to the next slide, please? So, as I just said, on the right, you can kind of see the comparison between the initial survey and then the follow-up interviews and meetings. We'll go to the next slide. So these are just some existing conditions pictures, kind of showing the areas that we're talking about as part of phase one. I'll go to the next slide, might be the good one. All right. So the areas highlighted in red would be the three components as part of phase one. The central spine is the walkway really connecting through the entire site that would be accessible, wide enough for multiple people walking at the same time instead of kind of having to walk around. With the concessions, restroom, support building, pavilion being kind of centrally located behind the batting cages. And then the lacrosse wall too, I did forget about that. We had looked at that a couple of years ago and it just didn't fit in, but we've done them in a number of communities, and the outcome of how much it's used is pretty incredible. And it prevents kids from hitting balls against the back of the field house. Go to the next slide. So this kind of just goes through those different phases with some precedent images, similar projects that we've done. So the initial conceptual pricing that we had done a year or two ago, we did bump it a little just as a safety net with the way everything's going. We are still comfortable that these numbers fall within the ranges, which falling within the range still comes out to the amount that recreation is requesting. But I think, as everyone knows, the volatility of construction materials and everything right now is just something to consider. That these are conceptual, where once we start having survey done and really start refining the design, we'll have a much better grasp on it. Next slide, please. And this is just a little crosswalk, look, pretty minimal in terms of space, and the location that we're showing seems pretty perfect with Turf 2 recently being renovated. Next slide. So the Imagination Station parking lot, again, like I said, would have a number of components, not only paved surfacing rather than the gravel that's out there. We would look to incorporate electric vehicle stations, charging stations, and we've already had some preliminary discussions with the conservation administrator about cleaning up the area along the Aberjona River and possibly making that an educational tool for the school and for the community. I think that was it. So floor is open for questions.
Okay, does anyone wanna, I think you had your hand up first, Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Marion. Do we have any sense directionally for what the net impact on the parking would be for what's sort of feasible on the site?
Offhand, right now, I don't have that, but I can try and pull that up.
Do you mean, Sean, how many more spots we're getting? 'Cause
Yeah,
that
I
would be
mean,
my question.
I don't know how they count the spots now, because people just sort of park wherever they can fit a car in on the dirt, you know, so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at is, do we expect it to be sort of flat, plus 50%, it's gonna double the amount of parking, like what does that look like?
How much is wetlands, right?
Yeah, I mean, presumably some of it's, you know, a lot of it's wetlands, obviously, so,
Brilliant. I mean, just looking at it and having been over there multiple times for parking, it looks like we're losing parking spots with the way it is. And, you know, as Sean, you know and remember, there's not highlighted in red, but, you know, on the far left side there, at the end of the ramp next to Castine is an area as well that was supposed to be for parking. So I'm wondering if, in order to not lose parking, if that needs to be included in this first phase, and if so, what would that additional cost be, right? Because as it's pictured, unless we increase the parking size and potentially impact that restoration area for the Aberjana River, we'd lose parking with this space and make parking worse at Birch Meadow with its plan as it is right now.
And just to note that the layout that's being shown, we have a couple different versions of it. Another one, which I think was the one that we spoke with conservation within the last 3 or 4 months was actually a bigger version of that. It's really gonna depend on how much they wanna push and what they're gonna allow the town to do with the wetlands. Otherwise, it has to stay as is.
Did you have a question, Chris?
Yes, yeah, speaking on the wetlands, if you go over there right now, that entire red area is a swamp right now. I don't even know how you can put anything over there. It seems as if it would be all or nothing if that was the case, because it's all underwater right now. So, I mean, I'd love to see Imagination Station, parking, et cetera, over there. I think it would fit, but I'm not sure how you get around like the never-ending story swamp that's over there. It's just, I don't know. I'm not in conservation.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
That sort of question was asked when this presentation happened at the school committee, and part of it is the restoration of that area to contain the river and control the river there so that it doesn't go outside of its banks and or that there's drainage to go down into it properly. Part of the problem is you don't have the proper drainage. You don't have the river controlled over there anymore as it stands. So that's, you know, speaking
I
for
guess it just
Steve, that's
feels
part
like-
of what the plan is to make sure that that is actually a maintained, contained area to address those kind of issues.
So you're able to prevent that area from turning into a wetland by containing it before it gets to it? Is that why it's?
If you go, can we go back a slide, Steve?
Okay.
Yeah, here, so if you look at the lower left-hand corner, part of it is having a catch basin to control some of the flow. And then there's all sorts of ways they can control that as well from a conservation. Having been to multiple conservation meetings for my house, they have multiple ways they work on managing the flow to manage it and make it a usable space.
Can I just ask a question, because related to this? Why was, given that, you know, it seems like we're more likely spending, you know, almost $700,000 on something that isn't really producing parking, like why was this based on the survey? Because I'm looking at the fiscal year 23 budget and there's a lot of other smaller recreation items that seem like you could add up and get a few other things bang for your buck. I'm just curious why this one was chosen out of, versus I'm looking at the capital plan for recreation in the budget and, you know, I'm not saying basketball courts, but basketball courts cost the same amount of money, like 500 to 650K. Or Morton Field improvements, or a small amount for Castine, like there were other things, so I guess why was this one, given that it doesn't sound like it's adding that much parking? Can anyone recall why? Was it the survey or? Angela, did you, or did somebody?
We can all add something.
Yeah, okay, the recreation.
Just come up to the mic so
Yeah,
we can hear you.
somebody can just tell me why this, cause it sounds like you guys have some other valid needs that might be more bang for the buck, I don't know.
So when Activitas did go through the critical items, they listed the Imagination Station Park as a critical item as it wasn't great infrastructurally. So the parking lot isn't very safe and it is very flooded in a lot of areas. We go there and pick up our kids for the middle school and elementary school ski program, and there's times that the buses get stuck in the parking lot trying to get out of the parking lot. There's no direct way, oh, this is the way you're supposed to come in, this is the way you're supposed to go out. So from our standpoint, maybe if we lose a few spots, I don't think it was an astronomical amount of spots, and Steve, you can look into that and we can get that information back. But the overall plan itself, we didn't lose any spots, we gained spots by creating that parking lot across from Castine, to Tom's point, and then additional parking near the Rise parking lot in the superintendent's office parking lot. We were gonna extend parking over there. So overall, we do gain parking lot in the overall parking in the overall plan. But to touch on that, the community priorities, that wasn't part of the community priorities. The restrooms were, the passive recreation was, improvement to lighting was. So that was an add-on, given some feedback from other town employees, as well as Activitas, just from the infrastructure standpoint of how the existing parking lot is, and it's pretty bad.
And I think, you know, as everybody knows, town meetings already appropriated $150,000 to do the study for this whole project. Parking is a small piece of it. There's a lot, and as I think Steve said, this has been around since 2007. This is shovel ready to go, ready to put some money towards, and you know, I think the town manager supports it, you know, it's a start. There's a lot more that's gonna go into it, but certainly, and I hope I don't upset the board of I mean, I don't, and you guys can disagree, that parking wasn't on the top of the list and discuss. It was getting the project going, the bathrooms, the spine and that sort of thing.
We don't disagree. I was just
Yeah.
asking, this particular segment, like, of the, $700,000, like, what percent's being spent on all the drainage and stuff, and what is on parking? It feels like you're spending a lot of time just fixing drainage and fixing wetlands, and if that's what the project is, that's what the project is. It just seems like this particular part of it out of the whole thing.
Yeah, it
Seems
is a nice
different.
chunk of change there. And I
And
think
again, they're conceptual numbers, and this is also including lighting, pedestrian level lighting, parking lot lighting, all of the drainage improvements, and then wetland restoration. So again, to help mediate some of that flooding and swamping that's happening, that's why a chunk of it is going to, unfortunately, the infrastructure that needs to go in place for this to be a viable, safe parking lot. I mean, there's no handicap accessibility, there's nothing meets ADA code, there's no defined entrance into the park, especially with that being a very, very heavily used parking area for this complex. So that's where we were coming from.
Okay, there were two board members that had questions, and then someone from the audience. Or did you have a clarification that would, before the questions, Angela?
Well, if you know the overall plan, then you know that like there's a combination of easy to do, low money, all the way to, time consuming, large money. And I think that what Jenna has come up with for this is sort of a combination of the infrastructure that needs to be done and the and the amenities like the bathroom. So, it seems like it's a good combination of getting the infrastructure done that needs to be done, and Chuck said, shovel ready projects, but they work on the phase one part of it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so first Sean, then Joe, or
Joe,
you haven't asked yet. Go ahead.
No, I guess it's related to the parking too. I'm just curious about the relative priority and how much is like asphalt versus like the rest. Okay, I think you gotta fix the drainage, fix the entrance, do all that good stuff, lighting, but is that like half of it, or? Because personally, I don't understand, relative priority wise, just regrade it. Like half the people in this town have trucks or SUVs or 3/4, right? If you regraded it and took care of the drainage issue, right? And maybe had some paved handicap spaces. And then, put some of the other stuff forward, some of the other recreation projects.
Yep, and Steve can speak to this too, but in the design phase, we'll get surveyors out to that area to give us firmer numbers on what we can and cannot do in regard to recreation, right, Steve? Or conservation, rather?
Correct, and I just touching on the asphalt, I believe we carried permeable pavement because technically right now it's gravelly paved, looks paved, but it's not according to conservation. So if we're gonna come in and say we need to pave it to be a parking lot, it's not just they can't just allow that because we're in the 30-foot and the 100-foot buffer. So it's whether it's a give or take with conservation, and we'll have to do some more replication, and I think that was kind of the initial conversation was if we can formalize some of this parking in this location, which seems to work, add lighting and other safety, if we enhance the wetland area, the buffer, the edge, and kind of increase some of that green space for runoff storage. We looked at it for snow storage as well. Then they could be a little bit more on board with that, with allowing to come in with pavement now. If that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. I'm just still questioning why you wanna do all that paving now, and asphalt's gonna go through the roof too, so, I don't know, so.
Okay, I think Sean had a comment.
Yeah, two things. I mean, one, I think, I understand it's sort of the point of the committee, but I think we should be cautious not to like retread decisions that have already been, not decisions, but discussions and debates that have been happening for years and have happened in multiple forums, so we should just sort of, think about that. The points about accessibility and safety of the existing parking lot are pretty compelling to me as the father of young kids who love to pretend that there aren't cars around them when they're running through parking lots and things like that. And the accessibility point, is a great one, right? Like it's not an accessible lot today. It's really difficult to access the rest of the facilities from that lot. And so I think that goes a long way. I also think, I'm just thinking about it, purely from this is more in the wants versus needs category maybe, but as we think about, this complex already sort of being, kind of a jewel of town and getting even better as we make these investments, having, sort of the gateway to that complex be this dangerous, muddy lot seems a little short-sighted, I think, all in. So I think this makes sense in the context of kind of the first phase of this project and appreciate the work that's been done to date on it.
So what I would just add is, we're not saying it's not getting done.
I know.
We're just saying that of all the many demands that are becoming on the ARPA money, we may recommend, hypothetically, we could recommend for anyone's request, we like it, we're gonna give you, half of what you want, 2/3 of what you want, because we have all these other great demands. We may say, no, let's go for all of this. So it still can happen. It's on the budget, it's in the capital plan for, I think, 20, for a few years down the line. I'm not sure if it's 24, 25. So again, it's just, maybe we're asking, okay, what, this is like a third to a half of the money that, I added it up, I think I got 1.7 million from rec, so maybe this is more like a third of
That
it.
was the high end.
If you had the high end, yeah.
It's a quarter, yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
So a couple of things, I think Sean's point is well taken, or a number of the points are well taken, actually, I should say. In terms of kind of how we've viewed this has come before town meeting also, in terms of phase one, and kind of as a package, and it may make sense that way. I would just also echo the question that Joe brought up too. I'm just wondering what aspects of it are handicap accessible, and what, as you've got $150,000 of town meeting money to kind of take the next step. I'm wondering if that could be part of it too, is just to understand those issues of, if we wanted it to be handicap accessible, what additional things are involved. Parking and I guess access, I'm assuming that the trail would be, but I guess that's a question also.
The trail would be ADA compliant as well, so both the parking lot and the trail, that's a top priority, is it being compliant. Absolutely.
Super, thank you.
Okay, Tom, then Chris?
So, I mean, fully acknowledging Sean's point, but also thinking about Mary Ann's a little bit in terms of how can we fit everything into this mythical bag of money that we're talking about.
It's not mythical, it's a real bag of money.
It's a bag with real money.
and conscious of how long this plan has been kicked down the path, right? I'm leery of taking a plan that will reduce parking for an unforeseeable period of time without addressing the other parking. So to me, it would make sense to say, if we're gonna do parking where we're gonna get to net positive in parking, then we need to do all 3 parking lots at once and not go into a place where we've done one parking lot, reduce parking pretty significantly, and then hope and pray that we get to the other two parking lots at some point in time in the near future. Maybe town meeting will get to the point where we have the capital to do that, but I have how long ago did we approve the lights that still haven't been done? It was 2016, if I recall, something like
For
that.
the override.
It was, 2015 before the override. So I mean, I think it's been a while, and I think there's a really great plan here with the central artery, and I think there's a lot of huge benefit that. But that central artery doesn't directly, there's a small connection. It almost more directly connects to the parking over by Birch Meadow than it does to the parking in Imagination Station. And so thinking about the handicap accessibility, that to me rings more true in terms of actually using the central artery and whatnot, but maybe I'm overthinking this as well. I just think that as we look at recreation, I can 100% get behind that central artery and that cost. I have a harder time getting behind one of three parking lot changes that will reduce parking capacity for an unforeseeable period of time. And so I appreciate, first of all, as well, that you brought these as two distinct numbers, because I think that's really important as part of this. And I think the central artery is the huge first win that will kind of build community support behind the overall plan. But I have a real concern that parking would then undercut that support for the long-term plan, saying, you just did this and you cut our parking down by 30 spots.
Sure, and also too, in our community survey, we did get a lot of feedback on parking and how hard parking was at certain times of the day. So we can also pull that data, and I think there wasn't an overwhelming parking issue from the community based on that survey and based on feedback in the community presentations. I didn't flag that as an issue, parking. Also, another thing I want to add about that lot is that facilities has been using it a lot for storing equipment when Turf 2 and Stadium have been down. So there's been a significant amount of spots that have been missing for multiple years. And no one has complained about that. So those spots will probably be part of the restoration area. And Steve will get them the numbers of parking spaces down there, and maybe I can go down during a busy day when Coolidge is getting out of school and count how many cars are in the parking lot too, to give you some hard numbers on that too.
Yeah, Jen, I appreciate that. I think that where I have seen, and I'm sure others can jump into this as well, especially those with younger kids, where I see it as a problem from a parking perspective is Saturday night.
Yeah,
right?
for Saturday night
With
lights.
Saturday night lights out there, there's no parking in that general area, and you have a really hard time. So I think it's less the school release times from my perspective. Of course, I'm not a Coolidge parent or a
Those
Birch
are
parent.
short,
And they're short windows. It's really more the athletics on the weekends when Birch is in full swing of being used, which is Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, that it becomes a challenge. Now, do we build that or take account of that just for that one period of time for fall period and spring period? Maybe it's not a big enough issue to your point, but that I think is the greater survey point than an end of day schooling close type period.
Okay, Chris, you had a comment?
Thanks, Marion. I just have a hard time seeing 2007 being used on something and then 2022 we're still talking about something that was never done. And just seeing it on the capital plan, in my opinion, it just seems like it will never ever get done if it doesn't get done now. To go to Tom's point about the parking, the situation that you're going to end up doing is you're going to make Birch Meadow, this whole area, so much more featured where people are going to want to come down, and you're going to create a even worse parking situation than what's going to be there, because you just added all this incredible stuff to do and then reduce the parking for it to even happen. It's just like downtown, you do the same thing. You can move however much stuff you want, you throw up 3-4 more buildings, and then you're out of luck. And the other point I want to make, so is the Imagination Station playground not going here? It just randomly happens to be called this? Is that the case?
That's what used to be there, right? So that's what we all call it.
It was a playground years ago.
the gorgeous playground, it's a travesty to
So
call it
where
parking
is-
lot.
so where
And
is-
how did that manage the drainage when it was there? Cause I moved here when it was there, but I didn't have little kids. That's getting off topic, you know, yeah.
So where is the playground going then? That, if we were to have one, like, is it,
Yep.
there's no plan for Imagination Station at all?
Nope, so the playground is the existing playground at the Bancroft Ave by the tennis courts.
Yeah.
That's the big one at the Birch Meadow complex, but then there's also one right across the street at the Birch Meadow School that is for the other age range and also has a rock climbing wall.
And I can just add, Mike Gray, I've been around, when we tore that down, we made it a conscious effort to make sure that every school had a new playground put in. So if you go to Barrows, that wasn't there like it is now. The Birch Meadow, the Wood End, none of those playgrounds were there, and they were in the capital plan on a cycle that they all got done, so that people had places to go because they couldn't go to Imagination Station anymore. And even the Hunt Park playground as well.
Yeah.
That was renovated.
Maybe we rename that to park.
It's very, I'm like, we're getting Imagination Station and parking, this is incredible, is it included in the 550 and now it's
So
not
there
even
was
in
a
there?
conscious effort to try to find replacement to that, not in one location throughout.
I mean, we have land all over the place. I think for the ARPA money for something, I heard through the grapevine, I wasn't here when the original Imagination Station, but that was a community event, right, where everybody just came down and participated in it. It just seems as, well, that too, it's gotta be maintained, just like all this stuff, that, all this money that we wanna spend, it has to be maintained. Otherwise, it's just coming down 20 years from now. The lacrosse wall will be on the ground a week after it's done if it's not maintained. So, I would just like, we have land all over the place. Imagination Station can go somewhere. It just seems too short-sighted not to still do it, but that's just my opinion.
Okay, are there any other comments from the audience, or Jackie, do you have anyone with their hand up online? I didn't see it when I looked before, but. Any more from anyone here? Okay, I think we are all set with this. I don't see anything. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you so much.
We'll get you the parking statistics, the number of parking that we have now and the number of parking that we will be hopefully gaining by adding spots. Alright.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Build a garage there? I think that.
Put the playground on the roof? Sure, I could get
What
behind that.
about elevated parking over the
Are you saying parking garage,
parking
Mary
deck,
Ann?
parking
Are
deck?
you
You
saying
could come down on the
parking
roller
garage?
coaster, you don't even need stairs.
We can connect that to Haven Street and people can park there.
Okay, so we're just about actually with the time that Reading Elder Services would have been here and can't be here. But if anyone on the call would like to give, without a presentation, a preview of anything, you're welcome to. I see Jean and Kevin on the call. I wasn't able to watch the Elder Services meeting last night, so I'd be curious if the kind of needs that you guys would be looking for, we already know about the senior center and that's gonna be discussed, but whether there are, it might fall into some of the social kind of needs that Sharon and Victor had talked about with food aid or other kinds of services for our elders. Does anyone wanna begin with anything, or Mark is
Okay,
gonna
I'll
start?
start. That's right, so, to your point, that did come up last night, at the Council on Aging meeting, and Kerry Valley was talking specifically, about the need for some folks in town who have needs and wondering if there might be some ARPA funds available. I kind of sprung onto Jean and Kevin the idea of, hey, I think last week I said, hey, could you guys come up with some proposals for the meeting tonight? And there was a little short notice and there was a lot going on last week with all of the discussions about senior center and things also. So the request is to kind of push that to the next meeting. But there were only some examples from last night. I know the council is planning on gathering suggestions from its members and coordinating those through Kevin. That's kind of the next step specifically that would
Okay,
happen.
so that would be,
And there was a fair amount of discussion about it in terms of different kinds of needs that might be there. But not something that's at a number at this point. Kevin, did I characterize that reasonably?
Yes, and like you said, Mark, we asked the council to, any requests to feed through me, and we would discuss, excuse me, and bring to the next meeting.
okay, I think it's useful too, like with anything else, with the criteria we're looking at, something that doesn't require hiring permanent staff, or that's going to need engagement with too many other parties to make it work. It's if there's like purchases of things or a defined amount. I think Sharon and Victor had said like money in the pockets, but with food prices going up, maybe our elders need some assistance with that, or maybe helping the food pantry would help elders too. That's just something I'm thinking, but it's gotta be more than food, I would imagine too. That just seems like a big thing.
What did come up was rent for a number of people as kind of another category in there. And I don't wanna speak for you guys, but I sort of am, so then I'll be quiet in a second. But in terms of the Council on Aging, it's more elder services, but it's elder and human services. So there are folks around town that aren't necessarily elderly that still have some needs. That could really use some help.
Yeah, I mean, just realizing that it's, time limited and money limited with the ARPA. Did anyone in our group have anything to say on that topic, or do we want to wait for the presentation at our next meeting?
I'm good.
Good? Okay. So the next topic on the agenda, and if we all scroll, we can kind of go past my memo. I'm just gonna walk you through. This is gonna be the intense part of our meeting, right? The ranking and discussion of things and seeing if I got the buckets right or whether I have too many buckets. So if we scroll to my presentation, so I'm thinking in the packet, it's starts at page 9. So what I tried to do, based on Joe had sent me some ranking things, which we'll get to later, the ranking part first, is just to go over everything that I've seen and also just where there was a dollar amount to add it all up. So this pie chart is gonna be a pie chart in flux. If we look at the colored pie chart, I mean, arguably, like you'll see when I got to categories, I said schools is clearly more than 12%. We just haven't gotten all the information, but from what I've heard, whether it's from our suggestions or the superintendent, out of the total, and you'll note in the corner of the presentation, the total of 15 million. If I added up all of the amounts that everyone put in for everything, it comes into twice the ARPA money. So we are gonna be doing some scaling. And in our recommendations, and the select board will be doing some scaling. But what I thought was interesting is, I guess if you looked at this and I say I added up my seniors block and my miscellaneous community priorities and my human services. So that is 16 and 6, 22. And maybe, some of nature is that. It ends up coming up to basically what Fidel gave us in the start, which was like a quarter if I thought about how it was actually coming. And say, I'm assuming the schools will grow more. And then capital infrastructure, I mean, I separated out recreation infrastructure just because there was so much detail. But that ends up coming to more than half just because it's the most detailed. I'm not saying that's half the money. This is not binding, this is just to give you a picture of between what you guys have given me and what we've had, where things are. It'll be very interesting to see how the community comes. And again, this may be too many buckets, but this is just the way things were going, and Excel allowed me to make a chart, so there it is. So now if we go to, and this is something where I don't know if I've double counted anything, if we go to the first list, think capital and infrastructure, and Fidel, please tell me where I've got this wrong. There's items I've put in, there's items I tried to find on the budget, but for example, I think we have 2 million for water tower in Walker's Brook Maine, but then I have Walker's Brook Water Projects, 400,000, and I'm not sure if I'm double counting things there. Like I was just, those might have ideas from members.
Yeah, so the water tower was $2 million. Water main repair work and Walker's Brook are the same thing. So it's not quite 1.4. I think it's like 1.2, because it's 4, 4, and 3. So yeah, 1.1.
Okay. So,
not quite 1.4.
okay, so I'm gonna just, I don't have that printed out here for me, but I'm gonna note. So the water main repair work was how much?
1.1.
1.1.
And if you change it to 1.1, the Walker Brook water project can come off.
Okay,
Because that's included in water main repair work.
okay. And then,
There you go. There you go.
okay, now some of these other items, might have been from unfunded budget. For example, I saw Rise Playground Surface. There was solar panels, which was a Chris idea, but there was no money with that. I don't know what that would cost. That would have to be costed. Sidewalks and trees, I think that came someone your range, so I just picked the middle, just to throw a number there. And so that's just that. We can think about ranking. Cemetery garage was something a town meeting member communicated to me, and that was the cost at the time. That doesn't mean we're gonna do it, but that said I'll include it because it was suggested. So that is that. If we think of more things, this is all taken from a spreadsheet and I can add it. But anyway, that that could clearly be all the ARPA money. And I don't know, fixing sidewalks, fixing trees, I don't know if that can be done for that amount. Did anyone have any thoughts before we move on to the next one? Chris?
I think that just misses, oh, well, this is capital and infrastructure, so that's by itself, so you have other items added up going forward.
Oh, yeah, all of the categories are added up.
All right,
This
yeah.
is just non-recreational.
Yeah. Okay, I'm good.
Go ahead.
So, and just give you a little background, so the sidewalk and tree number didn't come from kind of a bottoms-up estimate. It was just kind of saying, if we were to do some sidewalks and trees in a meaningful dollar amount, what might it be? And that's what those numbers are. There's nothing that says you get X trees or Y sidewalks.
Right, and so what I hope we'll do later, because this appears, I kind of, the packet's bulky because I'm showing it later, and I printed it out, is we could tentatively within the group try to apply some ranking criteria, what's ready, what's defined. We're ultimately, gonna have to go through that exercise. I don't know if every item is ready for it, but that's a preview, just trying to make sure I got everything from everyone. So now if we go to the next slide, Jackie. Schools, this definitely has some blanks. A couple of the items were ones I know I had put down. I had some middle school parents had mentioned IXL software was useful, and I got a cost from a PTO parent. And at the bottom, the 80,000, I had mentioned that in my recommendation of 20,000 a person for teaching fellows. The other numbers I think came from Tom Wise or, no?
No, we haven't provided any of these numbers yet. I mean, I think if you were to, the accelerating, extending, I think we heard when we did the February vacation that it was 35K a week.
Oh, 35K a week, I put 30K a week.
But that was at a relatively small set of students, so depending on, it would depend on how many students, how many teachers, et cetera. So this would be really rough. I don't think we have numbers yet for the early literacy, professional dev, and curriculum materials either. I think that number is gonna probably be significantly different than that.
Yeah, that was a number I threw at Dr. Milashevsky. I said 450, and he I don't know that he agreed to the number, but it's this all can be blank. But do you think this number, this school subtotal is way too low?
Way too low at 1.9, not necessarily, no. I mean, I think it's just a matter of how do you bucket it and what do we think is the right things to put in there that are the biggest bang for the buck.
Oh, sure.
Right, and I think that's you know, in our meeting on Thursday, we're gonna hear more about the literacy work, from Dr. Hardy. And that will feed into the presentation that we'll have for this committee in that first meeting in May as well, that will provide more details about what we're gonna do. I know as I've been in the central office, we have, you know, 4 different boxes of curriculum materials that people are looking through as part of the purchase that Dr. Milichewski talked about last time we're here. All of that then has to be supported by the professional development, both from a foundational perspective, but also from the material perspective. And then any in classroom related coaching and supports that are necessary for the teachers as they roll it out too will be part of that. So it's gonna be an interesting number to figure out what it is. And as Dr. Milichewski also said last time, it's probably a 3-year cycle at least. You know, grades K and 1, grades 2 and 3, grades 4 and 5, or something along those lines. At some point in line, 6 through 8 is gonna come into scope as well.
Sounds
So
like it's gonna not be able to be covered completely by ARPA.
well, I don't think it'll be able to be covered completely by ARPA, but I think the immediate ask that we're gonna ask in May is gonna be for the next school year. But we'll probably have enough information to say, and this is what we expect we'd need for, you know, FY '24, this is what we expect we're gonna need for FY '25. So you know, thinking about the timeline and horizon of ARPA, we might be able to, you know, think about it in that regard.
Yeah, I agree with everything Tom just said. I would just also add too, I mean, just as we think about the needs in the schools, remember that these are different than like infrastructure projects that we've known we've needed for years, right? This is largely in response to the impacts of the pandemic that we're seeing and diagnosing today. So I don't know that we're gonna be in a position, you know, in May or even in September to say these are the, you know, exact top things that the schools need, but we know that we will have needs that, to Tom's point, fit within the ARPA, you know, sort of fit within the window that ARPA funding can be spent. And we might have directional estimates for things like this, right? We think that, you know, enhancing vacation academies is gonna be the best bang for the buck, you know, and we think that it's gonna be roughly the scale. But I think if we put ourselves in a position where we're trying to say like, well, you know, you can renovate this parking lot we wanted to renovate for 10 years, or you can invest in needs that like we're just, you know, sort of fully being able to diagnose today, and maybe we'll still be diagnosing in the next, you know, few months or year. It's not sort of an apples to apples bake off, I guess, is some part of the challenge. So I want to just make sure we kind of plant that seed and think about it that way. I like that you had sort of the catch-all about general pandemic issues, right? Because I think that's probably almost a, you know, another important way to think about it from a school's perspective. There are the things that we know that are challenges and we're going to address, and then there are the things that we're still sort of diagnosing and figuring out what the right solutions
Here's the
are.
thing, that came from Mr. Doxer, if I recall, right?
Which
The 1 million for school pandemic issue. Somebody suggested that, but I think that was viewed as an alternate to all of this and not in an addition at the time.
Looks like part of the total here, so.
Yeah.
So I think where
I know, I realize that there's.
where I think it came from was in the very initial bucketing.
Yeah.
There was a discussion that kind of put a flat number out there for different
Yeah,
categories.
two, and
Exactly.
and something, yeah.
So that's where any numbers have come from. There's nothing specific
Right.
that said it's these things put together.
Well, maybe these aren't gonna be exact, but say it was 2 million for the schools and what there's going to be, half of that is gonna be remediating the pandemic. The reading issues existed before the pandemic.
Sure.
Right?
They did and they do, but the pandemic absolutely exacerbated them.
But I think that was something the schools were planning on doing, so this is a start. One question though, based on something both of you said, is what you're gonna come ask for in May is for the fall. There's not gonna be this need for money that we have to approve right away. Cause I wanna know if I need to, so
No,
that the school committee the schools can ask the select board for it and have it in the summer, cause I wanna know if we need to have a vote.
We should be asking for something in May for the summer / the fall.
Alright.
Because you have to prepare, you can't just say, here's money in August, and oh, by the way, now you have somebody on the ground to actually do the work, that won't work. So we'll need to have an ask in May that says, this is what we're asking for this next year. We'll also, probably will have context that says, and this is what we would expect might be necessary for the year and the year and the year afterwards. But the immediate ask would be for the next year as part of the particular.
Not for this summer.
potentially summer-related stuff. I haven't heard
Yeah.
from Dr. Hardy or Dr. Milichewski yet if there's anything in particular there. We did have that, post-February discussion, that Dr. Hardy outlined the positives and the challenges, and they were starting to plan for what a summer would look like. But there's also some of that Susan Baton and Dr. Hardy think there is some still in our existing budget that will help with some of the summer stuff. So we'll have to figure out how much can we afford ourselves, how much do we need to add augmentation wise, and make sure we're not double asking, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I mean, even, it sounds like when you're trying to rank, knowing what's ready, you have to know what things cost. Someone could look at something on this whole list, nobody really knows what anything costs other than going by next year's budget. The teaching fellows were $20,000 each, so if someone wanted to do that, we could say, well, if they'll contract with us some more, you can get them and that's the price of them, but a lot of other things are not known.
Yeah, I think that one is a little bit more of a challenge in that, Dr. Milichewski's worked hard to get the number of teaching fellows that we have already. And there's already more demand than there is available, so I think
Sure.
that's actually somewhat unreasonable, the 80,000 personally, from what I understand from the conversations with him. I think the real one that you're gonna see is the detail in the literacy side, right? Remember, we have a $200,000 grant that just that grant itself doesn't do much, right? It buys maybe 3 grades worth of curriculum, but curriculum without training, curriculum without supports
Yeah.
is worthless, right? So we need to make sure that money that we receive from the state is supported appropriately with the resources to roll out the materials that are purchased.
Yeah, I mean, I think with us ultimately, it's just gonna be, okay, just how much and balancing it with the rec
Right.
needs, with the first responder needs and all the other things, so.
Absolutely.
Anything else on schools before I go to the next topic? And this one, this kind of came from a mix of what people said, and I think I had put some down for unfunded priorities. I think the vague one was a sustainability one that might have been an unfunded item from Bob's budget. Otherwise, if you take that out, the numbers here are pretty low. I don't know, I think that was your one, Jeff, the first one, town forest improvements to increase usage and getting, I think I forgot the word, getting people outside. So I don't know if we know what that would be or what improvements would be needed. The lot 5, I guess, given what we just heard about how expensive it is to fix a parking lot, I would be surprised if it could be done for $150. Go ahead.
Can we comment on that one? So, we actually have received, $150,000 earmark already to do this work. It doesn't need to be ARPA, doesn't need to come out of our $7.5 million ARPA funding. It
Oh,
already
okay.
exists with the proviso that we spend it by the end of June.
So we don't need more money on top to do that, that will do all of the work?
As long as we can build a parking lot by June 30th, yes, the answer is yes.
Which would be a lot of rock to do that.
Yep.
We have to build it by June 30th?
The money has to be spent by
Okay.
June 30th.
Is it spend or commit? Yes, is the answer. Okay, I got it.
We don't need money to hook up that trail either.
I was gonna say, 150 seems impossible for this to happen. I mean, am I wrong?
In that
Like,
case,
150?
it's land clearing primarily, right?
land clearing.
I think it depends,
It's
yeah,
not-
exactly.
It's not paving and
No,
drainage
that
and.
We're not gonna pave much
It's
of
gravel.
Yeah, there's no expectation of paving.
We're not doing much.
So I think the questions thus far are parking, trail access, and the potential of restroom facilities of some sort, which could be porta potties or better. Porta potties plus.
Has someone done a plan? So if this was funded, I mean, I guess that's the thing, when we go through ranking things, is it all planned out and you know what you're gonna do? That's the kind of question we ask.
So it's in process
Yeah.
right
What I
now
heard from
as we
Marcus, he
speak.
doesn't need this money from ARPA.
Okay, good.
That 150 we have.
So,
Just like, I don't wanna spend money, but I think we still need a placeholder for tree removal though.
that was the one, trees and tree replanting, you talked about the pines, I remember that, I didn't put it all in here.
Okay.
And so the other items were just low-cost items that were not funded, but I saw that, when the select board had to do their ranking, like digitizing photo maps for 7,500 seemed like, I think I had put that down before, cause it was an easy thing, and it seems like if that's something you can buy it's like low-hanging fruit.
I just had, those were specific requests that came in, as you said, so I'm hoping that the folks who brought it in kind of said this is about how much it would cost.
Yeah, I mean, I took those right from the planning of the fiscal '23 budget, that items that were not funded, but that someone made a request for. And those were in my original, we all got together as a group. So the next slide, this is my best guess, so I'll cede this entire slide to Mark.
Yeah, so I authored these as, they're more placeholders than real numbers at this point. I think there's a bucket for senior services and activities. There's a discussion about first floor bathroom or not, that's certainly come up. The senior center feasibility study, the next step after recalc will be a feasibility study. And we've got an estimate, I think already, that one group came in with, it's a little bit lower than this. I've heard a number of people start to poke holes at it though, so I don't know that the 150 is what it came in at, and there's a lot of poking at it. So 200 I think is a reasonable estimate to put in there. And then the question on the senior center number was just kind of a general discussion about affordability for seniors and what we're gonna do, and it's just a concept at this point. There's nothing else behind it yet.
Yep, and I think because especially, the feasibility study would lead to, by the time things go through, I don't know when within the ARPA money spending timeframe, whether there would be a design or anything ready, or if it's going to be senior / community.
Right. And don't know that. I think that the likelihood is that a feasibility study could be commissioned probably late in the year. I'm not sure exactly how long it would take, but if it was, several months, certainly something would be in '23. But then certainly town meeting is gonna have to weigh in on all of these things as well in terms of what would happen, because it may be a very substantial amount of money or maybe a modest amount of money, or we may have options.
Okay. Any other thoughts here on the, as I'm looking at these, I'm really reminded of Monopoly properties. Why did I pick this? The colors.
Marvin Gardens?
Yes, Marvin Garden, like Illinois with the red, I guess. I don't know, I'm looking at them thinking Monopoly. Okay, so recreation infrastructure, and this was something, I sort of came close. I'm a little low than what they came out with. So the numbers went up from the budget because I think costs are going, and I had done playground, Imagination Station playground replacement, that was something Chris had suggested. I think some of these items, and the dog park was Chris's, I think Sturgis Park completion and Zany Land came from Tom, but there's no numbers on those. And we can think about numbers, but it sounds like from what we heard earlier this evening, there's already recreation has a plan, so maybe we're not adding other things on top of it. I did this before I saw their presentation.
So that number probably should change to between items 1 and 2, that's 1.75 million, I think.
Yeah, no, I
1.7, sorry.
realized that when I saw the presentation come through, and the other items were just listed there. I don't know if they'll come from the community, but I didn't have the lacrosse wall in there at all, and I'm not sure if I saw that in the town budget.
I thought was it planned out as phase 1?
So phase 1 is put in at $2 million. It includes a lot more things, yes. But the lacrosse wall is built into that $2 million location.
Okay.
And it's budgeted for FY25, if I recall correctly.
You wanna build up room, take out that lacrosse.
What did you say? Build up room for?
You want the room to be filled. Start
In other words, you don't wanna fight the lacrosse parents, this was section.
Okay. I couldn't even tell you what the wall is needed for, so that shows you what I know about lacrosse.
You throw a ball against the wall.
Off the wall and you can practice off.
Save a lot of broken windows around town too.
Yeah.
So.
And the field house, as was
Sounds
mentioned.
like we need more walls. Okay. So that's just recreation. I think I captured what I've heard so far. So this kind of ties in, there's blanks because I really didn't know where to go, and this came from Sharon and Victor's. I kind of summarized with a few numbers that did come in, like the Rotary, Jeannie had spoken to me and mentioned a number, so that was there. You mentioned an amount for the farmer's market study, and then these are open-ended buckets, and I don't know whether this is going to be leftovers when other bigger things are funded, but I think these are gonna grow and are gonna be important, and I don't know. I don't have down, like, I probably should have food and rental assistance here. Thought I had that suggested by town, maybe I didn't, maybe that was,
It's down below and,
You have it further down, yeah.
yeah.
Human services.
Yes, under human services, right near the end. Because I know that seemed like something that was important, and I don't know whether, I think that might be something worthwhile to see what other similarly situated communities are allocating. Cause like 10% of them, I don't know, it's maybe based on need. Does anyone have any thoughts? We didn't have thoughts before, but.
I think that Arlington allocated some money to food pantry support specifically, but I don't know how that's gone on in other communities. But I think we're hearing about it, and as you said, I think it's
And I
the right thing
think
to
we're
put on
gonna
the list.
find out with the survey. Now, the next page may be something that we could scroll ahead to the memo. I don't know if you all saw the memo from the North Reading Chamber of Commerce. Where I see human services on the next page. They had a specific amount. My title got chopped on my slide here, but yeah, if we look at the memo that Jackie has up, or if you bring it up on your slide, I think the memo is more towards the front of the packet. They had a lot of details, but if you notice, it's at the very beginning of the memo, it looks like they're asking North Reading as well. At first, when I was looking at this, I said, oh, are they asking Reading to fund North Reading businesses? So this was a very specific request with items, and some of them, it's a year one request. And so that means they want, some of it, they want a second year. I think one of the like business support, 25,000 complimentary memberships, and then it says, this is a year-on request that the activities may extend into years 2 and 3. So this all adds up to 105. I don't know if this is 105 a year. So does anyone have any thoughts on this, or whether we have to talk to North Reading? I don't know how this works if we try to split the cost with North Reading. Fidel, did anyone?
I haven't talked to the town manager in North Reading. I certainly can. I think it's North Reading is probably 40% of the size of Reading, right? So
Yeah, what
we can
was
use
their
that.
ARPA allocation? Was it
They have more business, it feels like, though.
Pardon me?
It feels like North Reading has more business than we do. But anyway.
Go ahead, you have a thought?
I think, if you go back to some of the original intent of the ARPA stuff as well, I think this fits in that category pretty well in terms of supporting local and small businesses. We've talked, throughout town for a long, long time about how do we want to support our small businesses and help grow that base and not decrease it. So if there is some way to, cost share this with North Reading's ARPA numbers as well, I would be supportive of this from a small business perspective, and I think that's what the focus is. It's not a huge amount that's being asked for. I think it's a reasonable amount as long as we can share it. It means it's the Chamber of Commerce is shared between both. It makes sense to share it between their ARPA and our ARPA, and it does fit the original guidance.
So North Reading received $4.6 million in ARPA.
Okay, and we don't know if they have, how they're deciding on how they spend it.
In my conversations with the town manager, it will all be used for water and sewer.
So, go ahead, Mark.
One of the things we may want to consider also is the business improvement district that's being formed, the BID, that is quite Reading specific and downtown business specific. And I don't know if it's worth chatting with Liz and the folks that are putting that together. It may be, I don't know how this kind of fits in terms of Chamber of Commerce versus the business improvement district and how it could be used. I do know that, did I see in here there was something about for businesses that were harmed. No, I didn't see that. So that's
it-
one of the things that some other communities have done.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they just talked generally that all business, you know, our chamber lost some membership, like in the memo, they get into that. I couldn't put all the top parts of the memo in my summary, so they were trying to offer, you know, support in that way. So if North Reading is probably spending it all on water and sewer, then I don't know if they'll be able to do the cost sharing.
And if you're asking them for 40,000 out of 4 million, I mean, are you really asking them for too much? Maybe, I mean, I don't know, it's obviously has to be work behind the scenes between Fidel and his peer in North Reading, but, I mean, I think, yes, you can spend 4.6 million on water and sewer, but can you carve out 40,000 for your small businesses?
Yeah.
Maybe, it's
We-
not our
we have
decision
no
to make, right?
jurisdiction over
It's not our
them.
decision
They're
to make,
select
but I
board.
have a feeling it's an argument to be made at
I
least.
mean, our recommendation to the select board could be something like contingent on North Reading, you know, contributing a share, you know, an equal share or a 40% of the share, whatever the number should be, right? The other thing we could do, I mean, the other thing we could consider, some of these pieces do sort of spike out, you know, can be spiked out by sort of supporting town-side businesses. So if we wanted to say, we will support, you know, memberships for Reading-based small businesses, right? If we wanted to say we'll support promotional videos for the Reading-based businesses, we could, you know, we could also potentially approach it that way. I don't know, if, you know, I don't know how that would work for the Chamber of Commerce,
Yeah.
but.
I don't know how they do it, go ahead.
I think we should be careful not to get into kind of too much detail. We're working on very small numbers and kind of thinking about tweaking little programs and things like that. I think we may be better off deciding to allocate a certain amount of funds to be used to support local businesses. And whether it's through the chamber, or it's the business improvement district, or it's direct through the town, through Aaron Schaefer, her department. And they work very carefully with folks on getting grants and helping the businesses survive. That may turn out to be a better approach completely. But I think the concept of, you know, hey, do we want to allocate something towards small businesses as a recommendation? You know, that's an interesting approach.
Well, this is, you know, this is something that came into us, so I wanted, in fairness, I wanted to share what it was. But if the town is also proposing its own businesses in this bid, the business improvement district, is a town originating function, then,
So that's not actually town either, that's a private.
so it's a competing similar function to the chamber.
Is that another private organization? Is that how it's set up?
So it's a quasi, it's a town-supported, self-sustaining entity that is funded by an additional tax in the corridor.
The tax paid by the members?
By the people inside of the bid,
Okay.
of the business improvement district. It's essentially a betterment, but it's for programming as opposed to infrastructure. So, I mean,
So no one on the, you know one member on the bid? I mean,
I do.
would it be prudent for them to submit to us a similar proposal like the chamber?
I'm happy to
or-
reach out.
Yeah, cause I think that that's the fairest thing, then we can see what they have in mind.
I do, I mean, yes, I think it makes sense for us to hear that. I do think Mark's suggestion actually is a good one, though. I mean, we should think about it in the context of funding to support Reading-based businesses.
But then who gets the money? Or the select board decides?
We let the experts at the town figure that out, I think, right? I don't know that I'm in a position to evaluate whether it's a better bang for the buck to give the North Reading Chamber versus the bid versus the economic development.
That's a
you know,
good
coordinator.
point,
Like,
yeah, I'm
in
not,
a
cause
position to
I don't know,
evaluate which of those has a
we
better
can't be
impact.
that specific, but someone else will decide who gets it. Okay,
I just have one thing.
yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Marion. I'm precluded from speaking on the bid because I own a business in the downtown. So I have an opinion, but I can't give it. Secondly, it's to support small businesses. I'm in Reading. I fully support that, and I will exclude my company from receiving any part of any of this stuff because financially we don't need it, luckily. But it definitely should be used for all businesses. I don't see how we can just pigeonhole 25 businesses to get, you know, videos or whatever scenario that they're proposing in here. It just seems like it should be something that benefits all Reading businesses down there. I'm not sure how we get around that. Like I said, perhaps Aaron and whatnot can expand upon that. But if we're gonna be giving money towards this in North Reading can't kind of scenario, it should be something that all the businesses in Reading, I mean, exclude McDonald's or or not, I guess, I mean, at least they're still here paying taxes. It just, something should be better benefiting everybody, not just 25. Seems like a very low number. There's
Like,
like
I guess
25
as Sean
liquor
said, we
stores.
have to trust the experts, so we give the chamber, and the chamber says we're gonna help small businesses, or we're gonna help our members, or I guess we can't probably get to that minutia and just decide an amount. But it's, you know, specifics are coming in, so people are thinking. Does anyone else have any more comments on that topic?
I guess to that point, maybe it's more of applying, the businesses would have to reach out towards something. And then this way here, you know, if someone doesn't apply for XYZ, then they don't get it. And if only 7 people do, then congratulations for the 7. So something like that. Just a thought.
Yep. So then, on the next slide, my Boardwalk and Park Place Monopoly color here, we have human services and social suggestions. And there are a lot of empties there, but I think we're hearing that this is really where, if you said, what was this money meant for? In addition to the schools, and, you know, this is where the pandemic effects seem to be. So I really hope this is something that, very soon we can at least get a bottom line number. Cause right now, 600,000 is like less than 10% of the ARPA money, and it feels like, does anyone have any thoughts? Even if we don't know what it is, like what percent of the ARPA we would think would be fair, or do we wanna ask the community? Just this plus whatever other human categories, cause I feel like this is an important one. Any other thoughts? Like, just percentages of the total? Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Mary. I just think that this number is skewed because of the 500,000 for affordable housing. There's no affordable housing in Reading at all. Like, 500,000 is
So
is
shift
what
it to
someone's
the
gonna
food
say.
bank.
There's
I mean,
10% affordable
Yeah.
housing, if not, we have
There
a
is,
different issue to deal
but
with.
but that 10% is not affordable to begin with for anybody in Reading. That's just, it's not a realistic number that people can live off of.
And not meant that way,
Yeah.
at all. So the notion is, and I take your point, we don't have a really good affordable housing plan in town. And there's a small amount of money that's been sitting in an account for at least a decade, I think more like 2. And we have no idea what to do with, we don't have an approach, and we aren't supporting it, and we're gonna get banged around by the MBTA now. And to think about a plan, putting it together, which I know Gene is actually working on, the notion was to be able to support it, because with a $480,000 budget, whatever it's sitting in there right now, nothing's gonna happen. So this was an attempt to say, double it.
Even that doesn't seem like enough.
I would
Yeah.
agree, I'm just not sure where,
Well, and even if it was making housing affordable and rent support, what happens when this runs out? We can't put people into housing, help you know, and you can help people through a hard time, but we can't have endless rent subsidizing, so.
And your point on rent assistance might be that it's more
Yeah.
pandemic relief oriented rent assistance to start.
And, you know, this also we can't tie it to personnel. Anyway, these are just the needs. We could prioritize within these, and the prioritizing may not take into account money. I'm sure the community may think of other things, but these seem to be some of the leading things that we all came up with or that we heard about. Go ahead, Joe.
Just a line item, I have no idea, I defer to the experts, but like substance abuse, I think you probably want like a placeholder for that.
Yeah, I think
I don't know where
you
you put
mentioned
it.
that, and I think I meant to include that in with mental health, but that was
Yeah, or
that
someplace,
substance abuse, yeah, no, that, if I didn't add the text in there, I definitely meant it, because I remember you seeing that. And that maybe goes to our public health department. But I'll remind myself. Okay, and, go ahead.
Can I just caution us here a little bit? I want us to be careful that, first of all, we need to figure out how much or how we can support this, but at the same time, we need to figure out that what we're putting here can actually be spent, right? That it actually, and it has a discernible outcome.
Well, that's what we're gonna be doing next,
Well, I
but
know,
yeah.
but I mean, some of this stuff, it's like, you know, how long it took us, how long to hire certain people into certain positions? Are we talking about hiring an additional person into some of those positions? Are we talking about more with interface, which, you know, disconnected from us for a period of time because they didn't have the people necessary to do some of this stuff? So I just want to be careful that we don't just say, hey, we got to put money into these buckets when we don't have a discernible outcome that comes from it, or a discernible way to hire to fill that, or temporarily consult to fill that, or something else along those lines, right? What are these numbers going to that is tangible, right? It's not just something pie in the sky, but there's a tangible outcome as a result of it. These are the areas that have a pretty big issue from a staffing perspective, right? That is part of the challenge. So if it is something like an interface or something like that, if we put more money into it, we get more support, I can get behind that. If it's something that says, hey, we want to put 50,000 and we don't know what it is, I can't get behind that, right? I just need it
What if it were training additional of our police officers in mental health? Is it like, what if this paid for more, that kind of training? That's tangible, right?
If it is something like that, that's absolutely tangible and could certainly do that. If Chief Clark were to come to me and come to us and say, hey, this would be great for us, and all, you know, we could train all 50 members of our staff or however many there are, and it will have this discernible outcome. Great, let's talk about that. Absolutely.
I know, we haven't got that.
But we haven't gotten that far yet, so.
That was just an example.
Right, but if that was one of the things that it was training, yeah, sure. Because then you have people that you're actually training, as opposed to saying, let's go hire somebody that we may not be able to hire for a year and a half, and then it becomes an operational cost as well, because you've hired somebody that you can no longer support in the long run with ARPA as well.
Sean, you had a thought?
I'm sorry, what is employment recognition, Lieutenant?
That was something that Sharon Engstrom and Victor Santiello suggested in the last meeting. And I don't know whether it was recognizing, you know, it may be related to back pay for essential workers. I'm not.
Yeah, my understanding is that some towns and the state are giving some low-income employees a stipend, essentially.
Yeah, the state has $500 million or something like that, and it's up to 3x the poverty line, so it excludes lots of people.
Right.
Okay, it was just the framing of employment.
Yeah, no, that
recognition.
was just the,
And the naming doesn't resonate, ring a bell?
yeah, that was how it was listed, but I was trying to simplify the categories.
So one more thing real
Yep.
quick, as I think through this. We, from a school perspective, saw a huge jump in nutritional assistance needs during the period of time that we were going through COVID.
And that's stopping this year too, the free lunches is
Free
stopping.
lunch is gonna stop as of right now for next year, except for those who qualify, so it's no longer gonna be free for everybody. But I think as well, what we heard on a relatively regular basis was the challenge that, you know, the food pantry was facing, and some of the other food distribution bodies around Reading were facing as well. So I can, you know, that's definitely something that could be necessary. I think we're also starting to see, I saw in the I don't know if it was the Journal or something recently, that we're now starting to see more foreclosures because of rental and mortgage related stuff. So if there's something we can do you know, from that perspective that supports people as well, that has both an immediate benefit for that family, and somewhat callously, it also has a benefit for the community that we don't have a bunch of houses that are foreclosed. So that helps us in the long run. So if there's something there that we can somehow assess need for and have a determined period of time, that's something I think that would be beneficial and does fit, again, the core requirements that ARPA put out initially before we put everything in this one big bucket for ourselves.
What do you mean by foreclosing? You're saying paying to prevent a house from being foreclosed?
Rental assistance or mortgage assistance. You could expand rental to be rental and mortgage assistance, right? Where somebody is out of work or something else along those lines and not able to pay things. There is rising, I haven't seen it for Reading necessarily, but nationwide we're seeing rising foreclosures happening. So just something to think about, expanding rental to rental and mortgage related assistance, again, for a short period of time.
Okay.
Just a question, Phil, is it maybe, I'm wondering if we should ask Jean and Human Services to help with this a little bit.
Sure.
And I'm thinking also about the Reading Cooperative Bank where we had established a program, and they may be a little bit closer to certain instances, see how many people applied for some of the programs. We did have a mortgage relief program that went through.
Yeah, last year, we had extra money we had to use or something, and wasn't there a program about a year ago, like, where they had, we got money specifically for that, all the towns did, and we were asking, and even our Boston student families, like, it was rental assistance more than mortgage, I thought.
So we ran a program in Reading, and our treasurer and Sharon actually ran it, or you know, it was through the bank, but we funded it, and they essentially it was up to 2 months of assistance, right? And we spent $60,000. So you know, if we wanted to throw that in there, then that's great. If we wanted to be a little bit more generous, you know, we could do a little more.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were specific requirements for that too. It wasn't just anybody, it was people had to
Right.
have a certain income level.
You have to establish the need, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, just on that, Fidel, was that in the period of ARPA such that we could pay ourselves back?
I believe ARPA is, we can only cover, no, the answer is no.
Yeah, I think ARPA only started in March or something, and then this was,
This
I know this was like
last year.
Christmas last year.
It was last year.
I can answer that.
Hey, Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
Sorry, I didn't want to butt in, but
No, please do.
the mortgage and rental assistance program was done through the CARES grant. So it was already funded through a grant, so we can't put it on ARPA.
Okay.
But we only ran it for like 4 weeks and got $64,000 worth of expense just doing it for 4 weeks. And ever since we ran the program, I have people randomly emailing me about the program, asking if we still have anything to help people. So it makes me think that there may be some people out there that still are in need of some assistance.
Perfect, Sharon, thank you.
I mean, I guess this is one of these things too, when we start deciding on spending this, like, people need things now or need things sooner, and are we gonna be reaching decisions like in the fall, you know, we don't, you know, there's short-term needs and long-term needs. We're not gonna drag this committee out forever, but it's gonna get handed off with some recommendations, but people may still, just like with the COVID test kits, there's shorter-term needs, they just have to tell us. Okay.
I mean, yeah.
Anything else on this topic? Okay, and this had a little bit more specificity. It was this last kind of topic, which was just non-infrastructure town side aspects, and so maybe this is something Fidel would know the most about. I believe the water reserves to stabilize water rates, that number could be a number in flux. This was something suggested to people, and I think you gave us a range of numbers, so I might have just picked a low one. I put already there next to the unexpected aspects of the pandemic reserve, because I know we did already give 250 to, I think that's what it was.
200, was it?
Was it 200?
I think it was 250.
250.
Oh, gotcha.
But to the public health department, and I don't know if we would be putting more in later. And then these last two items were just unfunded things in Bob's budget, and I don't know if one of them, the fiber network seems more tangible. I don't know if the license would then lead to further costs that we couldn't fund in the future.
So we were able to squeeze both of those in.
Both of those are, oh, okay.
They're all funded. Those two are funded.
So then, I guess
X.
X, yep, XX. So then, is there anything other than stabilizing the water rates? And then obviously these human needs that we just talked about, are there any non-infrastructure town needs that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll go back to you know, the big ones, right? Like water and sewer again is a big one. Recreation, I think is a big one. And Bob Little Shore, you know, as he was training me, right? He he essentially said that we need ARPA to build something for the community, right? And something that is buildable. It's an asset that everyone can see and remember. And Birch Meadow, he said, was a good way of doing that.
Right.
Of memorializing a project that has been in the docket forever, right? And we can get started. So I think on the smaller ones, I can certainly approach a public health team, the coalition, and Aaron as well, and see, if they had some money to spend, what's the best way to spend it? I could do that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know how much it would be. It seems like the other needs have gone into a lot, but I suppose if there was, I don't know, other than water rates, maybe they have some small low hanging fruit, I think is the term. That all add up along with other things to fill a community priority chunk. This may be something too where if we get to the survey of the community, they may, think of prioritize something too, or everyone must just say, may just say, go for Birch Meadow, this is what we want. This will make the biggest difference, and everything is gonna cost more than we think it will anyway. We can't fund everything. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks, Marion. Yeah, since the Office 365 thing was on there, that is a yearly license fee, and they just did increase the price like 20%. So subsequent years, now it's gonna be 60,000, et cetera. So I'm sure they already know that, but I guess the other thing that's not on this list that randomly, I asked Laura earlier, there was a calendar out front that used to be there that people could pick up from the RMLD, I think, that had the picture of the town on the front of it, and there was a gazebo that used to be out here that apparently burnt down or some scenario, or like, does nobody remember a gazebo right out front
Where's
here?
Bill Brown? We don't know.
But
You're
in
not thinking about
anyway-
the traffic dummy, right?
There's no more calendars, so you can't look at it, but there used to be a gazebo right out here on the front
Are
of.
you sure that it's not the?
100%.
Are you
Right in
sure
front of
though
Old
it's
South
not the
on that
Wakefield
part.
gazebo? Cause RMLD covers Wakefield, maybe it's the wrong gazebo.
100%.
No, it's not, okay.
You're right, I've seen the calendar, the picture on it.
See? I'm not making this up.
I'll second that.
So perhaps we could put a gazebo back out there. We have lots of events in the downtown. Seems as if that's a nice focal point that people could see that money was spent on, instead of Imagination Station that doesn't seem to be going anywhere in Redmond,
The gazebo.
unfortunately. Someone will find the count. I'll find it for next time.
Okay, so now, the rest of our meeting was going to be try to rank, and maybe this is just gonna be a very preliminary ranking, or maybe we don't rank, we kind of critique my ranking criteria. We had to start somewhere. So I just tried to think of considerations, and some of these came from other communities, or it's coming from what we all are discussing anyway. So what was original goal of ARPA? Does anything match our goals? I don't know about the goals of the town. I know we have goals of Reading Public Schools. I think the shovel ready and can't be done without ARPA money are interesting considerations, but if things are going, sounds like the Birch Meadow capital plan items will be done, are there with or without ARPA money, is so long as town meeting puts them in the capital plan. So that was just something that factored into the criteria. And then the next page, can you just scroll to the next one of criteria, Jack? So these are what I tried to get to in my tables, that maybe this is too much for us to be doing, but I think it's useful to know what % of the residents are gonna benefit from anything we suggest, because I think that can hit our ranking if something's going to benefit 25% of the residents versus obviously water and sewer benefits 100% of the residents. So that may help us to make decisions. I think the costs go without saying. Who's responsible for implementing? I think we just went through that with the business money, because it sounds like It's not the town that would be implementing that, it may be some private groups. Do we have to hire anyone to make something work? And how long will that take? Even if it's just, to design a gazebo or something like that. How easy it is to do, and that we may not be able to know that, that's kind of just going for the low-hanging fruit, shovel ready. The challenges, we all are aware of, Tom just mentioned staffing challenges, supply chain. I like the long-term budget savings and also thinking about increases associated with proposal. You build an imagination station, you have to maintain it. Solar panels could make us money, or that there just may be something that comes up that is more than a one-time thing. And I think public construction issues and ADA will come up with only a few of the things. And I guess alternate sources, whether there's Friends funds or other grants, if there's other ways to fund it other than ARPA, and we're just taking the place of that other fund for a while, and it's not a human need, we may factor that in, because, different athletic groups have their Friends boosters, the library has their Friends, there's places that are already getting their own special sources of money. And so our ARPA may be able to help where there is no other source. So given all of that, and I started, if we go to the capital ranking chart, and again, we're not looking at money, I realize I missed a block and this adds up to 90 and not 100, so we can start off, give everyone 10 points for being on the list. And I planned it that way. So what do you think of this kind, is this too many things? I mean, Joe gave me a great chart, but would have been 2 screens wide of criteria, so I was consolidating some of your ideas and some of these things.
Yeah.
And trying to come up with something where I said everything, we'll rank it on a scale of 1 to 1, either 0 or 10, or maybe some middling, and then with something like the percentage of people who benefit, for example, like my third column in. So for example, if I went through cemetery garage, like that might be a 0% of resident, I mean, it's living residents, right? But it's
100% of non.
People are dying to get in there.
ex-residents.
100% of Bill Browns.
But so it's not a residential benefit, it's a benefit for capital equipment that we own.
There are some residents who have family members who are buried in those cemeteries who will benefit by having the right materials managing the grounds properly.
Right, so it's not a 10 and it's not a 0, but it's a low one. How much do they need? Is it sustainable? We don't even know that that's ready. Maybe we just do this for projects that we know about, but can we execute within the ARPA timeframe, recurring costs? And then I left at the end, I called it group defined criteria, and I think my intent was to have another room for that. I mean, do we want to even do this for a lot of these? Do we want to wait for the survey? We all agreed we would discuss it, so I tried to come up with something. Go ahead, Joe.
What did you?
No, go ahead.
No, because I was thinking it's not just to manage all the information, but also to provide transparency afterwards. Because I feel like there's so many people, if we open this up and people contribute ideas, they're gonna wanna know, like, okay, why is my idea, like, not a subjective, oh, we thought of it, right? But be able to say, okay,
Right.
here's some criteria. And some of these things are much more subjective, obviously, right? Like, water, I think you can quantify that much more, right? There's some of these other things here that, they're really hard to quantify. But, maybe it's like, they're not even numbers. Maybe it's like red, yellow, green. And maybe it's saying like, it's a way to, okay, within each group, right, appoint people that say, here's our ranked priorities. And you roll that up, right? And you say, okay, if I run out of money, I get this allocation from the top. I'm just picking on schools, right? Whatever that number is, you get to the bottom of that, and at least you kind of say, okay, these are the ones that are on the fringe. So I think might be a way to help manage the information, but also afterwards, like provide like transparency. And I think there's other criteria you could have. I was in my own mind just trying to think, okay, rank ordering within different, categories, but then also rank ordering like top to bottom.
Well, that's
You end up
what
in
I
a
was
place and you
trying to
say,
do here,
oh,
but-
like there's something that's really good, whether it's a cemetery, but somehow it fell out of this process, right? But that somehow you wanna cover,
But if we went through this with one of these and you said, well, gee, we have the top 4 scorers on this, on if we tried to make this as objective as possible, then those are at least a guidepost to say, okay,
Yeah,
now
and-
let's
and-
see how
yeah.
much they cost.
Well, you decide what are the key ones, like maturity. It's something that you can spend, it's not recurring, right? It's not something, I don't know, just throwing it out there. It's just some way to kind of manage it all, so.
Okay, I'm sorry, Sean.
So, thanks, Marion. So I agree, Joe, with the point around transparency and sort of the importance of that. I worry about this approach for a couple of reasons. I think it gives a sense of false precision, potentially, right? Because these are very subjective ratings, I think is one concern I would have. The second concern I would have is, I'm not convinced that 100% of residents getting some nominal benefit is better than a small number of residents getting some life-changing benefit from something else we might invest in, right?
But that would get weighed in the number, right? I guess,
Well,
or
I don't know,
not, maybe
where's
we
the
have to treat
magnitude of
this.
the benefit those residents receive in the rating? See,
Yeah.
that's the point, right? Is like, there are things like that you don't necessarily get to. I don't know that I would say, some of these things I would just say are they have to be true or it's a non-starter. Sustainable when ARPA is gone, right? Like I think we would say,
So that has to be a
we would
checkbox,
say-
yes or no?
yeah, that's almost a must-have, or it's
Okay.
time limited, right? Not that it's sustainable, but it's time limited in some sense. So, I think defining these as sort of the criteria that we are incorporating and using to evaluate things is a worthy exercise for sure. Having just participated in a screening committee for a principal search, one of the approaches in that was everybody sort of submit your top choices and the ones you don't favor and that sort of thing. And all the ones that sort of unanimously appeared on the list made the cut, right? All the ones that appeared on none or very few lists maybe didn't make the cut, and then your discussion's really kind of in that area in the middle. So maybe another, a way to approach this that would get us to a sort of similar outcome and kind of bring in everybody's perspectives would be, what if we submitted what $7 million would look like? We've got the list of ideas here, we're gonna get input from the community, we're gonna hear what people prioritize. We'll get more clarity around some of the numbers on some of these. But what if we all submitted a list that said, if I had $7 million and it was, I were king for a day, here's how I would spend that money, and then we see where the overlap is, right? I mean, if we get to it and 8 of us have said $1,750,000 to Birch Meadow is on the list, then well, that's a shorter discussion to have, right? To me, that's probably I hear Joe's point. I think incorporating these as as criteria that we're all sort of using to evaluate the merit of these various ideas is really important, and articulating that is really important. And being able to, about the ideas that end up on the list, to talk about why did they make the list, why did they, sort of check a lot of these boxes, I think will be important from a transparency perspective. But from a rating perspective, I just think there's too much nuance in, benefiting a few people in a large way, benefiting a large number of people in a small way. What does shovel ready mean? Does it mean 10 years ago? Does it mean today? Or does it mean before the end of the ARPA dollars? Like, that's.
I think we would mean ready means ready, right?
Yeah, but so I would even question whether that we actually want to prioritize that. I'll come back to the point I made about on the school side, right? Like, the original intent of the ARPA dollars, which is another criteria that was listed on one of these lists here, was to respond to the effects of the pandemic. And so if there are effects that we are in real time identifying and developing solutions for, they're not shovel ready in the sense that something that we could start construction on tomorrow is.
Right.
But are they more or less merited than that thing? Maybe, right?
But will we be able do we know the solution to them within the time to spend the ARPA money?
In 2+ years, I would think so.
Maybe that's your checkbox on that one, is it, that's a requirement.
Yeah.
You have to be able to quantify a number, a project within the timeline that meets the criteria, yes or no? If it's a no, it's easy.
Execute within ARPA timing.
ARPA time.
That's right next to must have. Sustainable when ARPA is gone. So maybe we can circle the criteria on this, maybe that we do wanna go by, like must have, like sustainable and able to execute within ARPA timing.
Could I
Or
suggest
start executing.
one other thing that is, I don't think it's nuanced either. Some of these are resident benefits. Some of them frankly are staff benefits. So although I'm gonna use the cemetery garage. The real problem with the cemetery garage is that none of the equipment fits in it currently. We have big equipment and the garage doesn't hold it.
And the equipment will get into disrepair if it's
They get
not
into
properly
disrepair, it
stored.
means people are driving further, they're, if I were in Bill's shoes, I could make quite a discussion about this. And so, on the resident side, it wouldn't fit, but there are other reasons why we may wanna consider it still. And that's, I get the point, it's kinda hard for us to evaluate, other than we're all gonna have our own criteria, so let's just say, we all have our own criteria, which ones do you think and why and how much?
Yeah, I mean, like if I said percent, like if we talked about a dog park, you'd say, well, it benefits the people mostly with dogs, and what percent is, that isn't as, maybe that isn't as impacting as many people as some other aspect.
It also benefits the people that don't have dogs but use parks where dogs often do their business. But
Sliding into
point
third
taken,
being,
point taken, yeah.
Well, your point about how would we spend 7 million, remember we thought about the survey question, and this can kind of mesh into, if we maybe pick a few of these that seem valid, we thought about the survey question is, how would you spend $100? And I've seen that actually in some other surveys, and I've even seen one town, and it wasn't in Massachusetts, where just the select board went through that was making the decision, went that exercise. So maybe we need to do that exercise before we put it in a survey and come back just with a dividing, but we haven't finalized our buckets. So I started this meeting with a pie chart with buckets. Do we think those are too specific? Do we had very, very broad buckets initially with something Fidel suggested. And do we want to combine any of these? Because then if we start with that, we can come back with our homework the next meeting of how would we spend our 7 million or our $100, and then we can just extrapolate the percent to the 7 million. We'll have our 6th grade math competition to do that at the start of the meeting. So for categories, I think we know capital infrastructure, we know schools. How do we want to combine or separate the others? Do we want to just call everything community priorities that isn't capital and schools? I mean, I'm open, because this was just, go ahead.
I mean, I think this is kind of how they came in, interestingly. And the percents are just, the numbers that we've made up at this point. So that's, it has nothing to do with, well, okay, let's figure out how we're gonna spend the 45%. That's not how it's gonna work. But those are kind of the buckets we have.
I'm sorry, Jackie, could you just scroll back to the beginning, like the second sheet with the pie chart, so for the
So
audience
page
can follow?
2.
Yeah, so the audience can follow
Yep.
what we're thinking if we're gonna say,
That's the one.
yeah. So those were, again, the categories. There's some of the ones we've discussed, but,
Not all of them necessarily will be funded, but that's kind of where the requests have popped into so far. And again, percents don't mean anything.
so maybe I would make a proposal that, the miscellaneous non-infrastructure of town, which kind of fell away, we would just fold that into town, whatever percentage that is, so I could get rid of that category and the capital / infrastructure and just, slash town. I know Fidel said he would talk to other departments, but we'll just kind of keep that as a town side.
I think I'm sorry.
Good.
I think these buckets, or this rough number of buckets, could be the right way to present it in a survey, and maybe what we do is, and this would prevent us from being in a situation where we have to have dollar amounts to the dollar for every individual item, is for each bucket, provide examples of some of the scoped and unscoped projects.
Yes, I think that would be
fit into
helpful, that's a good
bucket,
idea.
right? So we could talk about, capital infrastructure, give a couple examples. In schools, we give, investments in early literacy, PD, and, some of those other things that we maybe don't have as well scoped. But we could give some combination of examples of scoped and unscoped things and, you know, have folks sort of give a sense for all the money should go to capital, schools and seniors, and the other things are are secondary at this point, whatever those things come out to be, right? You know, and then when we go a click down, you know, with this committee, that we'll have that as a point of input, a really useful point of input, I think.
So I think too, we also wanna clarify to the general community, when we see something like schools, to understand that when they say, oh, fix Killam or fix the field house, no, that's really capital infrastructure, so that people, cause sometimes people don't always understand that things that are the physical buildings of the schools and the grounds of the schools are really, if I'm expressing it correctly, the town side and infrastructure, right? Schools would be operation of the schools versus the buildings that the schools are housed in and their grounds.
Schools and the grounds are schools' responsibility, but it's a capital thing, so you could take the capital and say, this is school capital, this is water and sewer capital, and this is other capital if you want to.
I see.
But I mean, we haven't put anything in there really on purpose, because we feel like there's a greater need in other areas right now. We could have easily, I mean, I think RMHS is in there just because it was kind of a quick example. We could have easily put things like, we have a feasibility study coming up for Killam, it's gonna be $2 million, and we could have just said, hey, let's play that here. But we purposely didn't do that because we feel like there's another place for that to be. So I think you could take that capital if you wanted to and say, school capital, water sewer capital, recreation capital, right? Because all the recreation ask is capital. But yeah.
But functionally, we don't treat the capital as, the split's not applied to capital and things like that, right? So, you know, that it sort of happens outside of the
Right,
schools
that's
versus
kind of what I
town
was,
budget
just when
dynamic,
we're giving examples
Yeah.
to people.
Yeah.
Did you have a thought, Mark?
Yeah, maybe what we could do very specifically for the survey purpose is to say, don't think of Killam as being part of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the importance of giving the examples that we think are really sort of like on the table for this, you know, for this discussion, right? And I you know,
We probably can put down like 5 for each, just based on what we've heard from people and what we've all contributed. I think that maybe not necessarily the top 5, but 4 or 5 for each one we could.
there's danger, and I'm not just thinking about this in the context of Killam, but there's danger in saying that thing's not in scope, because is it gonna skew how people think about whether or not that bucket should get some funding if you're, so let's say we were talking about the senior center. If you said like, this doesn't include building a senior center, so somebody was like, whoa, we're gonna build a senior center? Well, I don't wanna spend ARPA dollars on bathrooms, you know, in Pleasant Street or whatever, right? So there's danger in calling out things that you're likely gonna spend money on, but you're not using this ARPA funding for. I think I'd be cautious with that approach. And
So maybe we're
just
better off
focus on-
talking about what's in,
Yeah.
the things that we've talked about so far, or that we wanna add. You know, these are the things we've talked about that fit that category, as an example.
That's right.
But I think we'll get an idea with the community. Some community members may say, well, you know, 25% of the people in this town are school kids, and so 25% of the money there, 25% are seniors, 25% there, the rest to capital, or the rest is split between the town capital and community priorities, and call it a day. I mean, there's so many ways they can break it up.
That's where it comes down to, how do we form the question, right? So we have to be, you know, thoughtful about forming that question and figuring out what we're gonna put in there. Without going, you know, the reason why we liked the survey last time was it was like, there was 5 or 6 items on there, right? It wasn't 20, it wasn't 30, it
This
wasn't.
is 8, and we can cull it down, it's simple.
Right, so we can cull it down even, I mean, but even this is, in some cases, it's probably, it's not descriptive enough, but it's, you know, so it's not tangible in some cases, right? That says, hey, I'm gonna vote for that for, you know, 10 cents of my dollar, or, you know, $10 of my $100. So we'd have to figure out how best to format to make it useful.
And then we're gonna have the other, and people will probably put things into the other, we can say, oh, you want this, it fits into this bucket, you just didn't classify it, but there may be some other thing, we're gonna have to have the other, cause people will wanna respond in another way. So leading to that with the survey, I think Mark and I had we had an email that it wasn't, maybe the whole group didn't get, but you had made an inquiry with, can you tell us more?
This flash vote group, so I contacted them to see what's going on. That's the group that did the Sudbury survey that Joe shared with us. And they can do quick polling, or they can do more of a, let's work with the town for a while kind of thing. Interestingly, the price for either of those two options is the same. So it's about $10,000, $9,900, to do a one-time survey, or to have the capability to do 6 surveys. It's about the same cost, the same $9,900. There was an issue of a one-time fee, but it sounds like that's very negotiable and not there. It claims to be a scientific survey. I don't know what that means. There's some folks who might be able to help us kind of think more about what that really means. If it gets what we're looking for. They would help with the kind of development of questions, and I'm sure we would want to help them as well. I'm confident of that. But that's an option. They claim it can happen quite quickly, literally a few weeks from go.
Yeah, it sounded like when I read through it, they knew how to get representative demographics for your community. I don't know how they were gonna get everybody. So hypothetically, if that's something that we went for, we wouldn't have, they would do all the reaching out somehow.
I think they would help us do the reaching out. They'd kind of guide us as to who it is. They'd identify it and then work with us to do it. But I think the physical hands of going out there are in the town's hands.
I see.
If we do the six version. In the one version, it sounds like you kind of say to them, here's what we want to find out, go and come back later and give us everything. We don't have to touch it.
I mean, you already, not to get out of the scope of our meeting, but you're doing a survey with Recalc and UMass is doing it, and they're handling the survey, or if you somebody said, here's a gift, here's the 6 surveys, you could use one of them for Recalc or not?
Well, as a supplement to what we're already doing, sure, because we've already contracted for what's gonna happen.
So it's really not needed though?
Not for that, but there could be other topics that could come up to use within the year. And you know, maybe that's something to think about. Are there other topics we want to bring through? I looked at some of their examples. Some of them I'm not sure I would want to approach, frankly, but you know, they have, let's see. So a city wants to use ARPA funds to benefit everyone. Electric utility wanted to know the demand for renewable energy. District was proposing improvements to their trash service. Our trash service is good.
We already did the RMLD already did a survey, right, recently?
They did a kind of a poll that was in the, you know, are you about to get heat pump equipment? Was what they did.
Oh, I thought
the customer service thing. I think
Yeah, that's
they
what I'm
did
thinking
last
of, where
year
they
or
were
something.
kind of justifying the add-on fee for renewable energy or something, but it seems like our town, has done some polls without, you know, this flash vote sounds nice, you would have to come up with the 10,000, but I think we're probably capable of coming up with some kind of a survey. It's just a matter of getting it, like without that, with, you know, Survey Monkey or Google Polls. Chris, did you have a thought?
Yeah, when I saw the 9,900 or whatever, it just seems like they were doing that to get around having to go out to bid, because then you're under the dollar amount, so you could just
That's
do it.
interesting.
You always gotta look for that loophole of somebody doing something. I think for me, 10,000 for one seems ridiculous when we can, definitely lots of free options, but 6 for the 10, that seems, I didn't know that portion existed. That seems highly beneficial. There's lots of things that we can learn from this, and I know now we're expanding it out of the ARPA money bucket area kind of thing. But if there was no time limit on the 6 surveys, or you had to use it within 3 years, that seems advantageous. If we had to do it all within one, I don't know if we'd be able to come up with various things that we want to do. But the way that Sudbury one was outlined, I mean, that's like the Rolls Royce of surveys. That I've seen anyway. It's not that I'm looking for surveys on a daily basis, but just the content and everything was there. To see the 10 grand is just a hit, but To have
But
six with no
Sudbury-
time
But
limit?
Sudbury, what I read
1
from
year.
press releases,
Oh, it is 1 year?
they've been partnering with Flash Vote since 2018, so
Mm-hmm.
they were gonna do this because they were already paying for it.
Yeah,
I don't know what other things they're surveying on.
I
It
guess.
just, I think we're probably not going in that direction, even though it's nice, unless we're gonna.
It is when
Unless
there's
the
other
town is
free
gonna-
options for the 10,000, just think what we could do with the 10,000. We already spent it before we walked in the room, so.
So do we feel, we're gonna still be getting input in the next meeting from elder services, more specificity from the schools. I think we all discussed having a goal of after town meeting to have a survey come out with simple questions. Did you have something?
I did, I had a question. It sounds like we're almost there on the survey, right? So if it's
Spend our
okay.
how would you spend our 100 question and
Right,
then
yeah,
maybe a few more?
I can talk to Jane Wellman and see, if maybe through our new website, maybe through
Facebook.
through other apps, if she could take a stab at based on everything that we've talked about, and maybe she can come to the next meeting with
That would be,
with options.
less homework for us.
Okay, I mean, I'm volunteering Jane, so it's, yeah.
She did a great job on the
She- oh,
override
great.
survey, I
Sure,
remember. If
okay.
if you've read back here, she got a lot of responses.
Okay, there you go.
The one caution I'd give is that one of the reasons that we're spending money with UMass is that not everyone has equal access to an online survey. And if we want to get a very representative sample of the community and say, well, it's just going to be online, there's a strong reason to believe that you will not get a representative sample of the community.
Well, when we had the override survey, did Jane do it more than just online? I mean, they got a lot of responses. Does anyone remember? I remember
I
you
seem
could
to remember
keyword search the comments. It was
Everything
crazy.
we saw was online based, right?
The data was entered online, but was it all taken online? That I don't remember, because we could certainly put a stack of surveys in the senior center and in the library, and I don't know what other places we reach out to get people who don't have computers
Yeah,
access.
we'd have to definitely have paper copies available for people.
But it's manageable. I mean, we can do it. It just means it's more work to do it in the paper versus
As long as
online.
Jane designs something that could translate to paper, I guess.
Yeah.
Because the other question is gonna have to get transposed anyway. When we have the blank area of whatever someone's gonna put in, that's gonna get entered in
Right, someone's gonna have to
somehow
read the handwriting or
Yeah.
put it on in. But if it's computerized, that can also be keyword search and say, how many times did people have the word school, or like it will be.
Yeah, Bernie on Park had somebody at his office do the open-ended question for our stuff, and he was able to translate it into some certain areas of various things, and he came up with something pretty good, so.
So you guys just did park what platform did the park survey go out on?
So we had the paper copies at the street fair and whatnot, but it was just online as well. And I think it was Survey Monkey if I had a, yeah, because it was the green
QR
background.
code, right?
Yeah.
Just grab,
Yep.
just take a phone.
Wasn't do you remember the override survey, was that Survey Monkey? Was, so,
Yes.
I'm sorry, the Birch Meadow, right?
Yep, master plan, and I've helped with a lot of these surveys as well in Survey Monkey, so I'm happy to help as well.
I volunteer Jenna.
And she's,
I do this for a living, so I can help visualize in the back end.
I'm sorry, I didn't get.
Emily's assistant, sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember seeing your name with the town
I already
manager's
told
search.
Mark I could be in the back pocket as an option.
So I think, do we wanna give some parameters, or let's see what they come up with? Like, do we wanna say no more than a certain number of questions, make sure how would you spend 100 question is there? I mean, do we think of any must questions? I mean, they're pretty good, but I don't know if we all had any.
Probably, like I said, as long as it fits on a page, you know what I mean? Because you can't have the one question with like 18 options underneath it and then expect that someone's gonna be able to see this on like a single page. But as long as it fits on a page, I think, 5 to 8 with an other in there included in it kind of thing seems reasonable.
Did all of these surveys have an open, apart from a question, an open response, like any comments you have? Cause I think that's gonna be that's already one of your other questions, maybe that's the hardest one, but you'll get some good input that way. So an open response, or how would you spend? Do we ask demographic questions, like, are you a resident, do you have a business and age? That's another question.
Yeah, that's probably 2 questions.
It's an important question though to understand.
When we last talked, we had 2 different ways of ranking, right? In terms of importance and the 1 to 10 or something else along those lines. We didn't necessarily have a complete agreement amongst this body, but that was, something that we had seen, and I think that concept generally was in the Sudbury one as well.
And I think in Melrose, they had
Right.
they had a lot more categories. So the how you would spend is one thing, but then a ranking of importance of the ranking could be broader than the buckets. I mean, I guess it could include.
Right, that was, there was like 12 or 15 items in that as opposed to just the buckets, so it might be the next level down from the buckets or something like that.
So if
Whether we
I'm
want to
writing
go
it
to
down,
that
we have the spend $100, we have ranking, we have open-ended, and 4 demographics, and that's 4 questions.
But they also like value, sorry, Mike. But
Okay.
but what you value in the community, like they start out too, because that sets you up to do the survey.
Oh, like,
Remember the first question? They had something to the effect like, okay, what do you
what do you
value
like, what do you
in
like
Sudbury?
about Reading or something?
Yeah, like something like, what do you value? Is it?
Which of the following things do you think are a strength of Sudbury?
Yeah.
That's the first question.
Rip off the subway survey.
So the strength of Reading,
Probably no question. Let's
Okay.
put it out there.
Well, that's five questions including demographics, so.
So demographics, you probably want residency and age, decide if you want gender or not. I'm not sure we're gonna make a different decision based on that, so I don't think
I
that's
don't
so
know
important.
I don't think that matters, but do we wanna include local businesses in it who don't live here?
They did owner and non-owner, I'm wondering if that's what that is.
It's probably.
Or it's probably homeowner, non-owner, no, that's gonna be homeowner, non-owner, sorry.
I would think that downtown businesses would be taking part of an online survey. I don't see why they would be excluded from doing it.
Maybe we just wanna know if somebody's responding, for example, if all of the businesses responded that they all,
Parking garage.
right, maybe that's something. But we are thinking, we've been asked by an organization to give businesses money, and maybe they would prefer the business improvement district, prefer the chamber, or just want direct assistance, or say, buy more tables and chairs, I don't know.
It doesn't hurt to just have the box if
If-
you're a
so
business owner.
Like a business owner in Reading.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think Home Depot is gonna be responding to
Yeah,
us.
you never know.
Not with thousands of responses.
They want a bigger garden section, maybe some sheds.
So, okay, it sounds like that would be a plan, and, we may, for accountability purposes, come up with something much simpler than what I did, and this was just,
Sorry, so what are you valuing in Reading?
right,
And it's gonna be as in like, which of the following is important to you? Open space,
open space, yep.
the Sudbury
School.
question essentially.
Demographic question.
Demographic question. If you had $100 between these areas, not
For the buckets, yeah.
not
Yeah,
money,
for
no,
high level buckets,
between
yeah,
these areas,
how would you spend?
it?
An open-ended question, just any comments, and either the ranking question or the $100 could both have an other box item, but maybe character limited, so someone's not writing a paragraph, just
I would
writing
leave
some
it
item,
out.
like say they just said parking,
Leave it out, that'll mess up your data set completely.
okay, leave out
You have the other bucket for them to put anything else they want to, that's
So
a
the
a
only
separate
open-ended
question.
is the open-ended, no open-ended on the $100, no open-ended on the ranking, no open-ended on the strength of Reading.
What's the ranking, sorry?
So the ranking would be
How many items? The ranking would be the next click down.
after.
Rank order all of these ideas.
Gotcha.
I think we need to think about that one because I suspect your full spreadsheet is 30 or 40 things. And that's too many to have in a ranking exercise.
Right, and the buckets are maybe too broad, or are they?
I don't think that they.
Because then you're getting a redundant question to the $100.
Yeah.
You're asking the same question twice, 7.
I think the point of giving of giving some practical examples of what we think will fall into those buckets is that the buckets can be representative of like general priorities that folks have. Right. And
So someone could prioritize things but still weigh their dollars differently, I get it.
Yes.
So they can be two different questions. So it could still be the buckets, but we'll have some examples for the bucket. The examples will be after the $100 question or the ranking?
yeah, I don't think that's what I was saying.
Oh, sorry.
You may be right, but I don't think that's what I was intending to say anyway. I don't think we need the ranking question. If we had a fewer number of things, if it was 12 things, then maybe you'd have both questions. With 30 or 40 things, I think it makes sense to use the $100 question as your proxy for both prioritization and impact and.
I think you can get to 12 to 15 out of these. This list is, there's a lot of things on this list that wouldn't go on that in my mind. Maybe I'm just, they're too small, or there's something else that
you could. Things just on that schools list, which ones are you ready to drop?
Most of them aren't things that we
So
brought forward.
pick the two most
So-
expensive
so-
things under every category, I don't know.
I think we're going way too deep here.
Yeah.
And I think that, let's think about what we're looking to get from this and what we're gonna do with it, right? So if we're asking everybody to rank the 30 things, first of all, that's unmanageable.
Oh, no, I was not even thinking of ranking all of those, I was
Right.
thinking only at bucket level.
Yeah, so at bucket level, if we take this mystical other community that we looked at, they said, the ARPA money can only be spent on the following 5 categories. Which are most important to you? You can pick up to 3. And the second question was, okay, you got $100, how would you allocate it across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items?
Same as us. And I didn't even look at that, okay.
There you go.
That's
Why
it.
reinvent the wheel?
And
Some friends.
we liked it.
So we just got
So
flash
tell
mode.
Jane Wellman to look at the Sudbury ARPA data survey.
Flash mode for $0. Yep.
Well, there's a little bit of work to do still, but I think the concept is interesting and we can do, I mean, I like the word clouds, frankly, we can do that, that's easy to do.
Just copy that one.
Word clouds in the survey or word
No,
clouds
the
when
results,
they present
the
the
results,
results?
the
Yeah,
results.
sorry.
I'll send a
What the
thank you
results
note
are.
to the select board in Sudbury.
Wait,
That's okay.
They're getting used to
It wouldn't be a bad thing to contact Sudbury
I
and just
wondered about
ask
that.
how they did it, what
Yeah.
happened.
Are they
what
finding the
did
results
this
useful?
work.
Are they doing something?
Yeah, what
what
do
do
they
they do
wish
with it?
they had on their.
Yeah.
Because
And what do they do with it? at the
They
end
got
of the day?
the same amount of money as us and put all that effort in, it's basically around the same amount.
But the only thing I think we can't do easily is the sample bias.
Correct.
I just think, like, I don't know how you filter that out, like, that's why these people do it for a living, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's a whole science, right? You know, I don't know how to do that, but I'm just saying, like,
Yeah, so
we're gonna,
do we have to have, this isn't gonna sound right coming out of my mouth. Does it have to be 100% representative of the community and statistically significant before we feel that we can use it? And I think the answer to that is no.
No, not for this amount of money, I mean, if it was
directional.
$200 million,
Yeah.
it'd be different.
Yeah, and we're getting buckets, and to some extent, I think what we're doing is we're kind of seeing if this group's directions seem to match the communities, or if there's something that we misfired on. That may be the way we end up doing it.
If you have age, precinct, if you have that demographic type information, that can help a lot, I think.
So interesting, they do precincts, which
Yeah.
was really interesting. But again, what are we gonna do with it?
And then
If we
we-
wanna have this depth, then we should spend the money. If we're just looking for a little bit of guidance, that's a different story, that's easier for us to
I do
do.
like the precinct thing though, that seems as if it's just a one-off question and it's good to know that like 90% of the people from precinct 1 responded on the survey and they didn't want anything to do with Birch Meadow or something like that, like, and it doesn't seem that difficult of
I guess it's
a question to
if
just.
they don't know their precinct, do we have to give them a map or just say precinct if
Uh.
you know? I know, I'm just
They don't know
saying.
their precinct at this point.
I work in that, nobody knows where they live.
All right.
So
we'll
just, so
toss
precinct
the
question, yes or
precinct
no,
in.
okay.
All right, tossing it on.
You could have a
If
map
we're
or
okay
something,
with
I
this
don't
kind of
know.
narrower scope, I think it's more manageable for us to do it ourselves. I think if we want more depth, more science, if you will, then we need help. Those are kind of the two options.
We have an NA for precinct if you don't know it. I guess that would tell you something, right?
Unknown, yeah.
We don't wanna scare them off the survey and say, what, I'm done with this.
Or someone puts 9.
Yeah, and the beauty of a short survey is you get more people to fill it out, and just looking at their stats, there's 95% of the people took 1 minute or less to fill it out. roughly? I mean, I made that up, but it's a huge peak at 1 minute.
If they
and
can
then
do it
go,
on their phone, we're gonna get responses if people can do it quickly, the people who have phone. Okay, so
Take
I.
out my question.
Do you have what you need?
I think I'm good to go.
Okay, so we're a little behind, I don't like to be behind schedule, but are we done with this topic?
Good enough.
Good enough? So future agenda items, so clearly we're gonna hear the survey, the schools are gonna talk to us, elder services are gonna talk to us. Is there anything else? Cause the next meeting will be after town meeting, I think we said it would be May 11th. So that would be, ready point, the golden month or two period. How long do we wanna leave the survey open to? You wanna wait till we see it, or do we wanna discuss that in the future? Cause that wasn't,
I think wait till we see the survey.
see, okay. So we will, next meeting after the presentations will kind of be all about the survey, getting it ready to go.
Did we want to ask if there are other town departments? We talked about economic
sure,
development as
sure,
an
yes.
example. If they have specific thoughts.
So leave it, we'll know by then, possibly other departments. Chris, I'm sorry, what is he saying, Chris, Sean?
I don't know, he's over there.
Sleep.
So he sits at select board meetings.
We don't particularly look alike, right? I don't know.
No, you're right, I'm just like.
Two to your left, two to your right, it's symmetrical, I get it. Do we wanna put something, so I'm thinking about the literacy piece in particular, and I don't know whether in May we'll be there or not, but do we wanna put just as an agenda item, just in case, like something around making preliminary recommendations if there are very near-term things we wanna be
The
responsive to?
time sensitive, yeah, cause I think that's kind of the deadline for time sensitive, if you wanted the select board at the meeting after that to vote to get money this fiscal year, maybe, I guess the select board can take votes whenever they meet.
As long as
As
it's
long
on the
as-
agenda.
Right, as long as it's on the agenda, but if there was any urgent,
And as long as it's recommended by the board.
Yes, as
Right.
long as we recommend it.
Right.
So it's a vote we have to take,
so
to Sean's point.
so I'll leave a vote possible on time sensitive, and that was my original plan anyway, thinking with the schools. Because even if things are for the fall, and I know they have to make purchases in the summer, so I just would wanna, hopefully be specific on the vote, just, we're gonna vote on some money, say what we're likely to, so the public knows. Okay, so that will be for the next meeting. I think we defined the next two meetings, we had May 11th and possibly, was it May 24th? So I don't know, I'm not ready to plan into June yet, maybe in May 11th we could plan into June.
Yeah, we can see what the results of the survey are.
Yeah.
Cause I know in Park, it took a couple meetings to go over all that data, and who knows what comes back with this. We could get 10,000 people reply, or we could get 200.
Well, I think we wanna make sure we leave the survey open long enough for
Oh,
people to hear
we
about
had it
too.
open, and that's why it transpired through a couple meetings, and then I think Liz or somebody did something that got like 300 more responses towards the end after, stuff started fizzling out, so.
How long, was it at least a month that you had your survey open?
I think it was, yeah, it had to be at least that.
I mean, I think a month is about the upper limit, I think 2 weeks is too
Yeah.
short, and we'll figure that out. But that'll, just thinking of the meetings, so, okay, so that brings us, I suppose, to the future agenda items, reviewing the minutes. So I guess those are, if you scroll all the way down.
Could I just also mention one other thing, Marianne, about
Oh, sorry.
having Fidel or somebody at town meeting mention that a survey is gonna be coming out regarding all this ARPA stuff? No problem. You know what I mean? So
Yes,
that
yes.
at least 200 people know about it.
Yep. Can I too, so the Council on Aging will be doing regular mailings, and we can mention it there too. If you're up to another group.
Like
And
snail
Rec
mail
has
it?
regular stuff too, don't you, going out? So there are some avenues we can grab.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it'd be just
Schools
nice, the survey has to be
Yeah,
ready for
sorry.
the Reading Rec
Absolutely.
publication and, yeah,
Yep.
there's lots of ways, so,
And I don't think Park went through the school scenario, because there was this quasi PTO gray area kind of thing, but I think this would fit into it.
well, considering some of the money is gonna go towards the schools, I guess the superintendent can decide in his Friday email if he wants to put a link to the survey or something, cause that'll increase.
No issues with us calling attention to community engagement type things, so, yeah, I don't see why we wouldn't.
Great. So the last agenda item before we close is the minutes, which are on page 38 of the packet. And Jackie, great job. As
Yeah,
usual.
great job, great.
She's always, she does her FinCom minutes too. And
Yeah, select board minutes.
And I will entertain a motion on the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes as what's the word? As presented, written,
Second.
March 29th.
For March.
2022, yep.
Second.
Okay, we'll take a vote. All that approve? All, okay. And, yeah,
Would you like to entertain another motion?
sure,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
okay, we'll go for the vote. All that approve? Okay, we are adjourned.